Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Was the League of Villains Weapon Zero? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. The cage reeked of iron and rot. Sweat clung to the bars in a sour film, metal rubbed raw by fists and boots and bodies. The copper tang of blood hung in the air like a second atmosphere thicker when the crowd leaned in hungry. Izuku rolled his shoulders. His ribs shrieked in protest. He ignored them. Pain meant he was still functioning. Pain meant he was still here. The announcer's voice sputtered from the half-broken speakers. In the red corner, your reigning underdog Zero. Izuku didn't look at the crowd. He never did. The chant of Zero, Zero, Zero washed over him like dirty water. Then his opponent stepped into the cage. Broad-shouldered, arms like steel cables. A grin that promised destruction. Stay calm. Breathe. Don't panic. The bell rang. The man charged like a battering ram. Izuku rolled to the side, letting the shoulders slam into the cage wall. Sparks flew where metal met concrete. Ribs hate this. Focus anyway. Then the hand came. Palm over his mouth, arm around his chest, yanking him backward. Izuku's heart leapt into his throat. The grip. That grip. Memories of the van, the cloth, the suffocating panic, the helplessness, hit him like a brick. Logic. I need leverage. I need an angle. Move fast. A violent twist, knee into thigh, elbow into ribs. The brute's grip faltered. Just enough. Izuku slashed at the elbow, slammed a forearm into the joint, kicked the knee, side palm to ribs. Precision, not flair. Efficiency, not glory. The man staggered, growling. Off balance. Izuku feinted, baited, twisted. Every strike, every motion, survival sculpted into art. He ducked another wild swing and muttered, "See? Predictable. You always overreach." The bigger man roared, pressing forward with brute force. Izuku's chest heaved, sweat stinging his eyes. Don't freeze. Don't panic. Don't get caught. Izuku feinted left, baiting the arm to swing past, then yanked sharply, snapping the elbow joint into the cage bars. The man roared, staggered, and before he could recover, Izuku drove a knee into the inner thigh, then delivered a precise upward strike to the solar plexus. The man crumpled against the metal wall, gasping, every movement jagged with pain. When the final strike slammed him against the cage, Izuku staggered back, shaking. Smart. Tactical. Alive. The crowd roared. Zero. 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 But Izuku barely heard them. For a heartbeat he was 12 again. Trapped, silenced, stolen from the world. Then he noticed the eyes. Not the crowd. A pair of eyes watching him from the shadows. Cold. Calculating. Gone as soon as he registered them. The cage door screeched open. "Let's go," Jiren said, waving him in. "You're done for now. Good work out there, kid." Izuku pushed through the dented door into the break room. A single table, a few mismatched chairs, and a stained couch that probably had its own criminal record. The flickering light buzzed louder than the one outside the ring. Jiren was already there, leaning against the counter with a grin all teeth and cigarette smoke. Well, kid," he drawled. "Didn't think you'd make it through that last hit. Had half the crowd ready to riot if you lost." He clapped Izuku lightly on the shoulder, careful. Even Jiren wasn't stupid enough to touch him hard after a fight. Izuku sank onto the edge of the couch, wincing as his ribs protested. "He telegraphed everything," he muttered. "Big swings. No DSPLN. That's why people bet on you." Jiren rummaged in a beat-up first aid kit, pulling out bandages and gauze. "You're small, fast, and freaky stubborn. Terrible in conversation, great in a cage." Izuku snorted, then hissed when Jiren pressed disinfectant to a split on his cheek. "Hold still," Jiren said. "You want infections? That's bad for business." "Business," Izuku echoed. The word always felt dirty here, like the blood they couldn't fully scrub off the floor. Jiren wrapped the bandage around his arm with surprising gentleness. People love an underdog, kid. Especially one with your reputation. He smirked. Had bets stacked so high tonight, I thought I'd have to start turning people away. Izuku looked down at his taped knuckles. They shook just a little. Adrenaline fading. Pain creeping in. They don't bet on me, he said quietly. They bet on me that I'll survive. Jiren paused, studying him. Something unreadable flickered across his expression. Not pity. Jiren didn't waste time on that. More like calculation crossed with a weird, reluctant fondness. Same difference, he finally said with a shrug, snapping the last piece of tape into place. Either way, you're making a name for yourself down here, Izuku. Or should I say, Zero? Izuku's jaw tightened. He didn't respond. He never did. Jiren straightened, hands in pockets, pretending to be casual. Crowd loves it, he added. Rolls off the tongue. Izuku looked away, staring at the peeling wallpaper instead of the man in front of him. He hated the name Zero. Hated how easily everyone used it. Hated how a word meaning nothing had become the only thing people down here called him. But he didn't correct them. Down here, names were earned in blood. And he didn't have the luxury of choosing his own. Jiren slapped a bandage over his last cut and stepped back. Rest up. You're headlining in a few days. Don't make me regret backing you. The mattress in his room, although could you really call it a room, was thin, the sheets thinner, and the air smelled of damp concrete and bleach that hadn't done its job. Izuku blinked against the harsh, flickering light overhead. His ribs ached even lying down, a reminder that yesterday's fight hadn't left him unscathed. He rolled onto his side, listening to the faint hum of machinery somewhere beyond the walls, the occasional scrape of metal against metal echoing through the warehouse. A single thought drifted through his head, almost lost in the fog of exhaustion. Another day. Another fight. Another chance to survive. The door banged open. Rise and shine, Izuku, Jiren said, his grin all teeth and smoke. The sound of his boots on the concrete floor was almost comforting in its predictability. You've got a meeting today. Thought you'd like to look presentable. Izuku's eyes narrowed. He sat up slowly, muscles tight. He didn't like surprises. He didn't like meetings. And he certainly didn't like the implication that someone wanted to see him. Jiren tossed a folded outfit onto the mattress. A sharp black jacket, crisp white shirt, and trousers that didn't smell like the cage. Figure you've earned the right to wear something that doesn't. Reek of blood and sweat. Izuku hesitated only a second before grabbing the clothes, making his way to the bathroom. Ooh, he asked finally, voice cautious. We'll see. Car's waiting, Jiren said, hands in his pockets, smirking. Move it. The car rattled the whole way there, one of those older sedans that looked fine from the outside but felt like it was held together by duct tape and spite. Every bump in the road made the frame shudder. Every turn made something in the back seat clunk like a loose metal pipe rolling around. Izuku sat stiffly, the cheap suit jacket digging into the back of his neck. The fabric felt too smooth, too clean, too obviously not meant for him. It clung tight to his shoulders like it was trying to strangle him into looking presentable. Jiren hadn't said much. Just sat there with one elbow propped against the window, eyes half-lidded, tapping something out on his phone. He didn't need to say anything. The silence already pressed down heavy, thick with unspoken expectations and the faint stink of cigarette smoke that clung to everything in the car. Izuku kept his gaze forward, watching streetlights pass like brief flashes of judgment. He didn't know where they were headed, but it didn't matter. Jiren had told him to come. That meant he was going. The car jolted to a stop in front of a warehouse that tried far too hard to look important. Fresh paint covered rusted panels, metal plates hid dents that still bulged, and the whole place had the awkward stiffness of someone wearing borrowed clothes. Jiren shoved his phone into his pocket and popped the door open. Come on, he said, casual but firm. Izuku stepped out, tugging at the collar of the jacket. The location hardly called for the attire he'd been forced into, rust painted over rust, concrete pretending to be polished, a warehouse trying to pass itself off as respectable. Jiren led him inside, the hinges groaning like they hated their job. The deeper they went, the heavier the air grew. Whatever cheap air freshener the place pumped through the vents thinned quickly, replaced by the familiar undertone of damp walls and mold no one had bothered to fix. They turned a corner into a wide-open room that was supposed to look important. It didn't. A couple of overhead lights flickered like they were dying, and the floor had been swept only halfway, leaving a gritty smear of dust trailing off toward the walls. And then he saw them. A man he remembered him from the news, from the USJ attack. Shigaraki. Or was that his name? His mind raced, trying to place it, but the memory clung like smoke. The realization hit anyway, sharp and cold. The man sat dead center, like someone had dragged a chair there and told him it made him look like a leader. The chair sagged beneath him, and he sagged with it, hunched forward, fingers twitching along his neck in restless scratches. Beside him was a girl he didn't recognize, dressed in a school uniform with double blonde buns. She perched on a stained crate, legs swinging, her smile far too bright for the dim room. Shigaraki's gaze snapped to Izuku the moment he stepped inside. "Zero," he rasped. "But you're here." He didn't waste time. "Saw your fight. Impressive. Message. Whatever." The girl giggled, swaying side to side. "He was covered in it," she chimed, tapping a finger to her lip. "All that blood, so cute." Izuku kept his posture stiff, jaw tight. Everything about the place grated against his nerves, the forced perfume, the peeling paint, the too clean collar of the jacket he didn't want. Shigaraki leaned forward, though it was hard to tell if he meant to or if the chair simply sagged more. His fingers twitched again. "We want you for a mission," he said. "Not spying or any of that boring crap." His fingers flexed. Thrift. Skin reddened under the pressure. "We're hitting the summer camp those UA kids go to." His leg bounced once, sharply. "Heroes, students, whatever, doesn't matter. You've seen how they move. How they fight. We want that. We want you." The girl giggled, leaning in, eyes wide and shining far too much. "It'll be fun," she chirped. "So many people to stab or meet. And you," she almost shivered, "you get so pretty when you're desperate." I can't," Izuku said, voice small, almost a whisper. His hands twisted in his lap, fingers gripping the fabric of his jacket. He remembered the USJ attack, the chaos, the screams, heroes falling, the way Shigaraki had torn everything apart. He just couldn't be a part of that. Not them. Not ever. Shigaraki blinked, then twitched, then blinked again. "You can't." His voice sharpened. "You think I'm asking?" Izuku swallowed hard. "I'm not. I can't do it." His words were quiet, obedient sounding, but his chest ached with how much he didn't want to follow orders. He couldn't even meet Shigaraki's eyes. The girl squealed, bouncing in place. "He's scared, I love it." A man with a patchwork face snorted, arms crossed. "He said no, Tomir. Deaf now? Or just stupid?" Shigaraki spun on the man for a fraction of a second, then snapped back to Izuku, fingers twitching in little spasms. "Choices? You think you get choices?" His finger jabbed toward Izuku. "You're tiny, fragile, and now you're trying to act like that pathetic jacket will protect you." Izuku's jaw clenched not from the insult, but because he knew Shigaraki was right. The jacket was nothing. It didn't protect him. It was just fabric. Shigaraki leaned back, arms crossed like a storm waiting to break. "You'll join the mission," he muttered. "You will. That's how this works." Jiren finally stepped forward, hands raised slowly, deliberately. "Let's take a breath," he said, voice calm but firm, the kind that hinted he'd rather not scrub blood off the walls today. "He's got a fight coming. Let him focus. We can deal with the rest later." Shigaraki grumbled, sinking deeper into his chair like a sulking child denied dessert, fingers twitching against his neck. "Fine," he muttered, voice low but sharp. "But he's not walking away from this." Izuku's stomach twisted. He pressed his palms to his thighs, forcing himself to sit still. His jaw tightened, lips pressed thin. He didn't speak. He couldn't. Not yet. He wasn't theirs. He couldn't be. Not fully. Not ever. He just survived. And that, for now, was enough. The hallway behind the arena felt even narrower than usual when Izuku walked back through it, like the walls had inched closer while he was gone. The ceiling buzzed with dying fluorescent lights, flickering in a sickly rhythm that made everything look jaundiced. The crowd's muffled roar seeped through the walls in dull pulses, the kind of sound you felt in your ribs long before you actually heard it. Izuku stopped in front of the cracked full-length mirror, the glass warped enough to distort his reflection if he moved even slightly. He just stared. What stared back at him looked more like a ghost of himself than anything solid. Knuckles taped, bruises blooming under the skin like ink stains, hair messy from the warehouse's humid air. Dark circles pooled under his eyes, deep enough to look carved. He flexed his fingers. They trembled. Not from fear. From leftover adrenaline. From the kind of pressure that didn't leave when a fight ended. Focus. Focus. He touched a fresh scrape along his forearm, the sting grounding him. Pain was easier than thinking. Pain made sense. He stepped into the tiny training alcove. Jiren had carved out a punching bag held together with duct tape, a mat that smelled faintly like old sweat and disinfectant, and weights that clanged louder than they should have. Izuku started moving without thinking. Knee. Elbow. Each motion sharper than the last, something habitual and practiced that smoothed his breathing and cleared the leftover rage Shigaraki had dumped on him. He murmured under his breath, barely audible. Pivot, trap the arm, counter the knee. Don't let them corner you. He wasn't the strongest. He wasn't the biggest. But he could outthink anyone who tried to break him. The bell in the back room rang Jiren's signal. 15 minutes until go time. Izuku didn't flinch. He pulled on his gloves, tightening the laces with practiced motions. His muscles still ached from the last fight, and the next one would only dig the bruises deeper, but that wasn't new. It was expected. He caught his reflection one last time. Not heroic. Not monstrous. Just a kid who refused to die for someone else's entertainment. I don't belong to anyone, he thought. Every scar. Every plan. Every fight. It's mine. A knock sounded, 2 short taps, 1 long. Jiren's pattern. Time, kid, he called through the door. Crowds waiting. Izuku exhaled slowly, letting the tension settle into something sharp and functional. He stepped toward the hallway, gloves tight, mind shifting into calculation mode. The cage was waiting. And he wasn't walking in blind. The hallway leading to the cage felt colder this time, or maybe that was just Izuku. His heartbeat stayed steady, controlled, even as the crowd's roar vibrated through the metal floor. Jiren walked ahead, not bothering with pep talks. He knew Izuku didn't need them. The cage door screeched open, metal teeth grinding against a warped hinge. The sound always set something primal off in Izuku's chest. He stepped inside. Wiry. Fess. Not a brute like the last one, this one was a problem. A predator who watched with sharp eyes, analyzing him with the same focus Izuku used on others. The kind who didn't waste energy on theatrics. Izuku preferred honesty. The bell rang. The first attack snapped toward him, a high whip-like strike aimed at his face. Izuku ducked under it, feeling the air split inches above his head. Predictable only in that fast fighters always tried to overwhelm early. Izuku's mind clicked into rhythm. Step back, observe bait counter. The opponent pressed forward immediately, testing him. Hook, cross, low kick. Izuku shifted under the hook, deflected the cross with his forearm, and twisted away from the low kick just in time to feel the brush of air against his shin. Pain flared briefly where the kick grazed him. He could use that. Izuku darted left, tapping the cage wall lightly with his glove, letting the opponent think he was cornered. The man lunged in, eager to capitalize. Predictable. Izuku slipped under the punch and slammed a quick knee into the man's thigh. The fighter grunted and staggered back a half step. You think you can corner me? Izuku hissed, barely above a whisper. Another flurry came at him, faster this time, anger creeping into the strikes. Izuku sidestepped, redirecting the man's arm with a subtle tug that sent him stumbling past. Emotions weaken angles. Angles win fights. He closed the distance again, jab high, elbow low, step behind the leg, forcing the opponent to guard wrong. A sharp heel kick slammed into the inner thigh, dropping the man's balance for just a second. A second was enough. Izuku hooked the opponent's wrist, twisted the arm sharply, and rammed a knee into the solar plexus. The man wheezed, folding inward, breath stolen. Izuku pressed the advantage 3 tight punches to the ribs, a calculated strike to the elbow joint, another knee while the man was still reeling. The fighter crumpled against the cage, breath rattling. The crowd erupted, chants of 0, 0, 0, thundering like a storm beating on the bars. Izuku stepped back, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his forehead. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't need to. He was alive. Smart. In control. Then, through the blur of movement and noise, he saw them. The pale girl in the school uniform, hair twisted into double buns, and the scarred man with flames liking at his skin. Lurking near the far wall, eyes sharp, hungry, fixed on him like predators sizing up prey. His stomach clenched. Revulsion, fear, something colder beneath it. The bell rang. The fight was over. Izuku pushed off the cage, muscles trembling but holding. Let them watch. Let them wait. Let them think they had power over him. They didn't. Not fully. Not yet. No fight. No bloodshed his or anyone else's could make him theirs. Izuku stumbled through the narrow hallway behind the cage, the crowd's roar fading like distant thunder. Every step dragged against his ribs, every inhale a sharp reminder of the last fight. Sweat and blood streaked his skin, slicking into the tape over his knuckles. The door to the break room hissed open. Jiren leaned against the counter, arms crossed, smirk still plastered across his face. You made it. Again. Izuku didn't respond. He sank onto the couch, muscles quivering, body screaming, mind running through the fight in fast forward. Mistakes. Openings. Timing. Angles. Every move he'd made, every advantage exploited, he analyzed it all before the pain fully settled in. Jiren crouched beside him, pressing a disinfectant pad to a fresh cut on his cheek. You're getting sloppy, he said lightly. Can't have that in the next one. I wasn't sloppy, Izuku muttered, voice hoarse. You look sloppy. Jiren smirked. But I get it. Crowd, adrenaline. Still patch yourself up. Izuku ignored him, focusing on his fingers, flexing them slowly. His thoughts drifted elsewhere. The lingering impression of eyes in the shadows, calculating, studying. Someone wasn't cheering. Someone was observing. Across the city, in the shadows of a deserted warehouse, Aizawa's eyes traced every movement through a crack in a boarded-up window. He didn't flinch at the blood, the bruises, or the grime. He'd seen worse. But what caught his attention was the boy's mind. Tactical. Adaptive. Desperation honed into skill. He had expected an adult. Someone hardened. Not this. Not a kid. Aizawa's jaw tightened. This wasn't just the cage. This was child exploitation. Someone was turning a child into a weapon for profit. And if he didn't intervene, the boy wouldn't survive. He didn't move yet. Just observed. Calculated. Made a mental map of how to intervene, how to extract, how to stop the operation without tipping off the predators above. And then he vanished back into the shadows, the warehouse swallowing him whole again. Silent. Watchful. Waiting. It happened fast. 1 minute, Izuku was walking home, backpack hugged tight to his chest, Bakugo's words still crawling under his skin. Useless. Quirkless. Deku. Like poison lodged in his throat. He kept his head down. He always did. He just wanted to get home. Then tires screeched. A shadow. A door sliding open. A hand clamped over his mouth so hard his teeth cut into his lip. He didn't scream. He kicked. Someone stronger pinned his legs. He twisted, panicked, but another arm locked around his chest. His breath came in ragged gasps against the cloth pressed over his nose and mouth. The world blurred. But he woke to concrete. Cold and damp. His wrists ached from zip ties. Blood coated his lips where he'd bitten himself. Some kids cried. Some wore a blank expression. They all sat perfectly still. A girl next to him wiped her nose on her sleeve. They take us to fight, she whispered. Her voice cracked. If you lose? I don't know. Something bad happens. Izuku's stomach twisted. He tried to speak, but his throat refused. He spent 3 days there. Maybe 4. Time blurred. He memorized footsteps. The sound of keys. The exact moment guards loosened their grip during shift changes. He tried to escape once. Got caught. Threw up from fear afterward. Didn't sleep the rest of the night. He tried again. Caught again. He didn't stop trying. He remembered someone grabbing his arm and shoving him toward the cage. He remembered the way his breath stuttered. The bars were too close, too tall. Too much like the van. He didn't think. He just ran. He twisted, slipped, and tore free. Bare feet slapped concrete. Heart hammering like it wanted out first. Hands lunged for his shirt. He tore it, ducked under an arm, scraped his palms on the floor and kept running. Left locked. Right locked. Straight ahead wall. He spun, breath shaking out of him in fast, sharp bursts. His back hit the corner. Nowhere to go. Kid's at it again, one guard groaned. Little brat doesn't quit. He's not gonna last anyway, the other muttered. They started toward him. Izuku pressed himself so hard against the wall it hurt. His hands curled into fists without his permission. His vision blurred at the edges. Every instinct screamed run, but there was nowhere left to run to. Stop. Everything halts. Jiren steps out of the dim hallway, cigarette glowing, coat hanging open like he didn't have time or patience to close it. Don't rough him up, Jiren says. If he's damaged before evaluation, he's worth less. Worth less. Not kindness. Business. Guard step back. Izuku stayed frozen, shaking. Jiren takes a slow drag, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Look at that, he says. Cornered, bleeding, scared out of his mind, and still checking for exits. He flicks ash onto the floor and sighs. Get him processed. One guard hesitated. Processed? You want this one in rotation? No, Jiren said. He could go far. I'll sponsor him. Words settled heavy in the air. Not a rescue. An investment. Jiren looks at Izuku again. More focused now, like he's already planning what to do with him. What do you say, kid? Izuku doesn't speak. Doesn't move. Doesn't know what answer would keep him alive. It doesn't matter. Jiren turns away before Izuku can even try to form a response. And that was it. The last moment he might have had a choice. If he ever truly had one at all. The crate slammed. Metal against metal. Never a door. Jiren's version of wake up. The overhead light buzzed as it flickered on, painting the concrete room in washed-out yellow. The floor bit cold against his feet when he slid off the mattress. His ribs complained, but he'd learned to breathe around the ache. Out in the hallway, he heard Jiren curse low, sharp, irritated. Izuku inched his door open. Jiren was already looking at him. Clipboard in one hand, cigarette dangling at the edge of his mouth, hair mussed like he'd been pacing more than sleeping. His shirt wrinkled. Eyes tired. But you're awake, Jiren muttered. Get dressed. He stepped into the room without waiting and tossed a folded shirt and pants onto the bed cleaner than usual. Cleaner always meant trouble. Izuku didn't ask. He just stared at the clothes, shoulders tense. Jiren sighed, rubbing his forehead with the heel of his hand. Relax. You didn't screw up. Someone else decided to make my day annoying. Izuku's pulse eased just a little. Then Jiren held the clipboard out. Izuku read what was written. Slot request, Fighter 0. Purpose, observation. Payment, confirmed. Requested. No option to substitute. His stomach tightened. Someone bought your match tonight, Jiren said. Without consulting me. Izuku's throat went dry. Who? That's the problem. Jiren paced once, cigarette flaring. The buy-in is too clean. Perfectly routed. Zero noise. And the courier had government shoes. Izuku froze. Heroes, he whispered. I'm not saying that. Jiren's voice went flat. I'm saying someone with money and polished boots wants to watch you. And I don't like that. Izuku's chest tightened. Heroes wouldn't understand. Heroes wouldn't listen. They'd see the blood, the ring, him in the middle, and think he chose it. Arrest him. Or worse, they'd try to save him and get him hurt in the process. Shirt on, Jiren said, snapping the words but not cruelly. More like someone juggling too many problems at once. If I decline the slot, I look guilty. I send a message I don't want to send. Izuku forced his arms through the sleeves. The fabric dragged against fading bruises. What message? That I'm hiding something, Jiren muttered. Izuku swallowed hard. Jiren didn't look at him when he added, quieter. Don't worry. I'll figure out who's poking around. He flicked ash off his cigarette, checked his watch, and stepped back. Downstairs in 10. And kid, he paused in the doorway. Eyes up tonight. Whoever paid. They weren't casual. Whatever he meant, it wouldn't be in his favor. Nothing ever was. Aizawa slipped into the warehouse with the rest of the crowd. Shoulders low, hood up, hands tucked in his jacket pockets. Just another face. Just another body moving toward noise. He found a seat near the back. Far enough to stay unnoticed, close enough to see every inch of the ring. Zero stood inside it. Thin. Shoulders pulled tight like he was trying to fold himself in half. His eyes flicked from corner to corner, measuring exits that weren't there. Aizawa's jaw tightened. He shouldn't be here. And the commission had made sure he was anyway. We need more intel, they'd said. He appears to be participating willingly. Willingly. Aizawa dragged in a breath and forced it out slow. He'd heard excuses before. That one was new. He didn't know if it made him furious or exhausted. Probably both. A man sat down a seat over, elbow knocking into Aizawa's knee. Good timing, he said, grinning at the ring. Kid's a favorite. Fast little bastard. Aizawa hummed like he agreed. Zero raised his hands. Too practiced. Too careful. The kind of posture a kid learned only when every mistake hurt. The bell rang. Zero moved. Not like a fighter. Like someone who had run out of options. He slipped under a wild swing, feet skidding on concrete, breath sharp. The crowd cheered like it was nothing. The kid reminded him of his students of the way they braced before training matches, trying not to show fear. The difference was they had a choice. They had people to pull them out if things went wrong. Zero had no one. Another punch came. A blur of force, more than muscle, the kind of weight that carried momentum with it. Zero twisted, dodging as best he could. It grazed his shoulder enough to stumble into the ropes. The kid's opponent, Vector, moved like every swing carried energy from the previous one, each strike adding to the next. A quirk, maybe? Zero's foot dragged, ribs tightening. A flinch passed across his face before he could hide it. Someone behind him whistled. Look at him go. They said this match was requested special. Good money behind it. Aizawa's fists curled in his pockets. The commission had paid for this. Paid to throw a kid into the ring. And for what? Observation? He swallowed down the anger. Zero twisted under another swing, moving his whole body to make it work. Clever. Desperate. Something cold slid down Aizawa's spine. Vector swung high, the momentum of his punch almost carrying him forward like the air itself was bending along with it. Zero dropped low but too slow. The hit grazed his shoulder, sending him stumbling into the ropes. Breath caught. The bell rang. Not the end. Just a round break. Zero exhaled like he'd been underwater too long, backing toward the side gate, head down, shaking. He moved along the crowd's edge, too close, too unaware, too exhausted to notice he was drifting straight past Aizawa's row. Heart picking up, Aizawa reminded himself. He wasn't supposed to intervene. He was supposed to watch. Gather intel. But the moment the kid moved into his path, close enough that Aizawa could see the smear of blood on his jaw, the decision made itself. His chance was right there. And he wasn't going to waste it. The hallway felt too bright after the cage. Too loud. Too open. His skin buzzed like he'd been scraped down to nerves. He stumbled toward the side gate, trying to catch his breath. His shoulder screamed with every step, but his brain had already started spinning. Kinetic, okay, so the way that punch moved it wasn't just muscle. The air around it momentum transfer? Force propagation? Yeah, that's it. If he rotated his torso slightly earlier, angle here, foot placement there, he could double the output without even trying. And if he combined it with weight, that could create a secondary impact wave. And what if he... No, focus? His breaths came in short bursts, but analyzing the fight helped him calm down. It gave him something to hold on to, something precise in a world that was otherwise chaos. If he could understand the mechanics, the variables, the limitations, maybe he could survive. Vector was fast. Faster than anyone Izuku had faced outside of controlled training. But it wasn't just speed, it was efficiency. Each strike carried residual energy forward, almost like the punch didn't stop at the impact point. So if he angled the follow-up just right, that wall over there could become part of the attack's vector. Oh God, the math on that. He sank to the floor behind the side gate, water bottle shaking in his hands. Shoulder throbbed under the tape. Heart still hammering, but his mind refused to stop. I bet if I just shifted my weight a fraction faster, I could— oh no, too slow, wait maybe if I pivot? Okay, vector's punch kinetic energy distribution, residual force still carrying through. If I angled my forearm like this, maybe I could redirect the momentum, lessen the impact. Diamond, his follow-up would come faster than that. Someone stepped into his path. Izuku froze so fast his breath caught. Automatically. Like a shock collar without the collar. The man didn't crowd him. Didn't grab him. He just lifted a hand. Stop a second, he said quietly. Izuku didn't move. Couldn't. Had he been mumbling equations? Strategy? Was this man angry at him? His pulse hammered in his throat, too loud. He kept his eyes down, but he saw enough boots, worn cuffs of dark pants, a coat hanging heavy around the man's frame. Not a guard. Not a buyer. Not laughing like the others. You're dragging your left side, the man said, tone flat. Observing, not judging. You're gonna make it worse if you keep walking like that. Izuku swallowed hard. His shoulder throbbed under the tape. He hadn't realized he was dragging it. He didn't answer. Words never came easy after a fight. Too many instincts buzzing, too much noise in his head. He risked a tiny glance upward. Just enough to see a face. Tired eyes. Sharp, but not the sharp that cuts. The sharp that notices. Izuku's stomach twisted. Why was he looking at him like that? Why did it make his chest feel tight? A voice from down the hall snapped him out of it. Zero. Back to the ring. Izuku flinched, shoulder screaming, heart stumbling. Sir, thank you, sir, he muttered, barely audible. The man stepped back immediately, giving him space. Like he had expected the flinch. Like he knew the shape of fear well enough not to touch it. Izuku didn't understand that. Didn't know what to do with it. He ducked his head and slipped past, quick, trying not to limp, trying not to feel the man's eyes following him. He shouldn't have looked. Shouldn't have slowed. It was careless. The darker corridor leading back to the cage swallowed him, and he pressed against the wall for a moment, trembling. His palms slick, shoulders screaming with every shift. Why had that man looked at him like he was human? And why did it sting more than any punch? He forced himself forward, step by step, his mind screaming, "Don't think, just move." But the voice lingered, cutting through the chaos in his head. "You're gonna make it worse." A single glance. A simple sentence. Yet it left him feeling exposed in a way the cage never had. The door clicked shut behind him. Izuku pressed his back to it, breathing too fast. Too loud. He tried to slow it, but that only made the shakes worse. The room was dim. One flickering bulb, the smell of dust and metal. Familiar. Safe, in the way cages become safe when the alternative is worse. He slid down the door and sat on the floor, forearms on his knees, fingers knotted together tight. Instinctively, his mind turned to the fight. Analyzing moves, angles, quirks, this usually helped. Normally. Working through quirks and probabilities, calculating reaction times, mentally replaying every movement, it made him feel steady, grounded, sane. A lifeline when the world felt like chaos. Vector's quirk kinetic redirection was fascinating. If he micro-adjusted his shoulder rotation here, redirected the stored momentum there, and the way Vector anticipates center of gravity, if he chained that with a short-range quirk, he could flow around attacks like water. He muttered under his breath, "Rebound force here, counter-torque there, stagger timing, yeah, 3 or 4 hits, clean, efficient, never losing balance, oh my god, so adaptable." Usually, breaking down moves, angles, and quirks kept him grounded. Usually. Not now. That man in the hall lingered in his thoughts, uninvited. He hadn't shoved him, hadn't laughed, hadn't treated him like the others did. That made it worse. Izuku couldn't trust it. Nothing in this place came without a catch. Every step back, every quiet word felt like it might be a trap. His gut wouldn't let him forget it. He pressed his hand to his shoulder, still throbbing from the hit. The man had been right. He was dragging it. Stupid to let someone see that. Stupid to let someone get that close. Focus. Predictable. Jiren liked predictable. Predictable meant safe. Predictable meant survival. He curled his good arm around his knees. Not crying. Not shaking. Just tired. Even as he tried to push the fight out of his head, the quirk analysis kept racing angles, counter-movements, hypotheticals filling his mind as much as the memory of that strange, watchful gaze. Izuku didn't know how long he sat there. The room stayed dim, buzzing, still. His heartbeat finally slowed to something almost normal, but his skin still crawled like he'd stood too close to a fire. He pressed the heel of his palm over his eyes. Stop thinking. Stop replaying it. Footsteps echoed down the hall, uneven, familiar. Izuku snapped upright. His breath caught. Jiren. He scrambled to his feet just as the lock clicked. Jiren stepped inside, exhaling a long, exhausted breath. Smoke clung to his clothes, hanging around him like a second coat. He closed the door with his foot and scanned Izuku in a quick, precise sweep. "You're back early," Jiren muttered, as if it were somehow Izuku's fault. "Good. Don't wander. Place is rowdy tonight." Izuku nodded, hands clasped behind his back to hide the tremor. Jiren tossed a sealed water bottle toward him without looking. Izuku caught it against his chest. Shoulders still attached, the tone was offhand, but the glance wasn't. Yes. Jiren didn't push. He didn't do sympathy, but he also didn't want his investment collapsing on the floor. He pulled out his phone, scrolling with a frown deep enough to cut lines into his forehead. "Fight went fine," Jiren said, distracted. "Buyer got what they wanted." He clicked his tongue. Still waiting to see who signed off on that transfer. Izuku's stomach tightened. Curious, he thought. But he didn't say it. Jiren didn't look at him when he added, "Get some rest. Tomorrow'll be busy." He turned, hand already on the door. Izuku swallowed. "Jiren." Jiren paused, glancing up from the tablet in his hands. "Someone stopped me in the hall during the break." He didn't dare look up. After the first round. Jiren didn't tense, but his posture straightened, alert. What kind of someone? Izuku hesitated. Why had he spoken up? What if it really was the heroes? A flicker of hope rose in his chest, only to drain just as quickly. All he managed to say was, "Not one of ours." Jiren nodded once, jaw tight. "I'll look into it." Then he left. The door shut again. Izuku sat on the edge of the bed, the water bottle untouched in his hands. He wished he hadn't said anything. He wished he'd said more. He wished the man in the hall hadn't looked at him at all. Aizawa walked into 1A the next morning with a mug of coffee and about 3 hours of sleep. His eyes were half-lidded, the same as always, but the tension in his jaw hadn't eased since the conversation with that boy. The room buzzed with chatter before homeroom. Normal. Except, "Did you guys see that video last night?" Kaminari whispered, excitement lacing his words. "Which one?" Gyro asked, not looking up from her notebook. "That underground thing. Some fighter. It was blowing up online, then got taken down." Uraraka frowned. "Was it one of those fake stunt channels?" "Probably," Gyro shrugged. "Nobody posts real criminal stuff online." Aizawa's grip tightened around his coffee. They weren't far off. But they weren't close either. The footage was grainy, short, stripped of context. No way anyone could tell the fighter was a kid, not unless they'd been 10 feet away, watching him stiffen every time someone got too close. He exhaled through his nose. They shouldn't be talking about this. They should be worrying about class, training, normal things. Not illegal rings. Not fights that shouldn't exist. Not kids forced into cages. He set his mug down with a quiet thud. "Phones away," he said. "You can discuss videos after school." The students jumped, startled at the early cutoff. They obeyed instantly. Aizawa opened the attendance sheet but didn't look at it. His thoughts were elsewhere in a dark hallway, watching a too small figure flinch, hiding a shoulder injury. He'd seen enough scared kids in his career to know when someone wasn't choosing their circumstances. The commission could pretend the match was thesis, pretend it was all useful intelligence, but they weren't the one looking the kid in the eye. He was. And he'd seen the truth in that half-second glance. The kid didn't need observation. He needed out. Aizawa took a slow sip of coffee. If the commission wasn't going to fix it, he would. Quietly. Thoroughly. Open your notebooks, he said. Today we're reviewing threat assessment. The class didn't know it, but he wasn't teaching it for them. He was planning a rescue. The water hissed as Izuku lowered himself in. Ice cold. Chirp. Immediate. He bit back a gasp, teeth cutting into his lip as cold slammed through his legs, up his spine, into his chest. Every nerve screamed. Instinct begged him to pull away, to run, but hands pressed into the sides of the tub held him in place. Jiren stood at the edge, clipboard in hand, cigarette dangling loosely from his lips. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Every twitch, every microflinch, every hesitation was already being catalogued. Izuku's knees trembled. His fists tightened beneath the surface, nails digging into his palms in a useless attempt to steady the shaking. Move your toes, Jiren said finally. Izuku lifted a foot. Barely. The cold gnawed deeper, an invisible vice clamping around bone. He flinched anyway. Better, Jiren murmured, flipping a page. You were slow out there. Hesitate like that again and the next hit costs more than money. Izuku swallowed, his shoulders inching forward. The water burned, vicious and unrelenting, but he stayed upright. He had to. Rules had been burned into him long before this. Mistakes weren't allowed. Not here. Not ever. Jiren flicked ash to the floor. Smoke curled around his face like a lazy, mocking halo. You think the cold is the worst part? Jiren asked, voice low and measured. It's not. The cold strips you down to instinct. Shows me every twitch your body doesn't want me to see. He tapped the clipboard. This is the real test control under pain. Learn to command your body when it wants to run. Freeze here, and you'll freeze in the ring. And freezing gets you killed. Izuku's teeth chattered uncontrollably. His shoulders burned. His arms were both numb and sharp with cold. Every breath scraped his lungs raw. Hands above the water, Jiren said. No gripping the sides. Don't cheat yourself. Izuku obeyed, tearing his fingers from the rim. Without the anchor, the cold hit harder. Burning, numbing, then burning again. Seconds stretched, slowed, bent. The pen scratched paper again. See that? Jiren said. Conversational. True. That's fear. That's hesitation. That's what gets you broken in the ring. Fix it. Now. Izuku closed his eyes. Water. Pen scratching paper. His teeth. His breath. Nothing else existed. Breathe, Jiren said. A command. He tried. Tried to force air past the cold that clamped around his ribs like iron. Inhale pain. Exhale shiver. His heart hammered, wild and frantic. You're shaking, Jiren noted, flat and clinical. Control that. You don't get points for being human. Every muscle screamed, every nerve raw. Survival wasn't comfort. It was endurance. And endurance meant obeying. Every order, every pause, every silence. Jiren circled the tub. Didn't touch him. Didn't speak. But the weight of his presence pressed like iron. One slip, one flinch, one heartbeat out of place, and you were nothing. You're stiff, Jiren said finally. Stop bracing. Feel it. Or the next fight will rip you open. A flash of memory. Voices screaming, bodies hitting concrete, the ones who didn't get back up. Mistakes he would never let himself make again. Finally, Jiren straightened. Flicked ash from his coat. Smoke swirled, lazy, dangerous. You can get out, he said, deceptively soft. Neutral. Deadly. Izuku climbed out, legs trembling so violently he nearly collapsed. Water dripped from him in sharp, icy rivulets, hitting skin already raw. "You'll do better next time," Jiren added, almost casual. Almost kind. But Izuku knew better. Kindness wasn't real here. It was a warning. Fail next time, and escape wouldn't be offered so freely. He shivered, jaw clenched hard enough to ache. Vomit and despair rose in his throat, but he didn't curl up. Didn't disappear. He'd learned. Because Jiren was always watching. Because survival meant obeying. The ice bath left Izuku hollow. Not empty, scraped out. Trembling so violently he feared his teeth might crack. Every muscle screamed, even the ones he didn't know existed. His skin burned from cold that felt lodged deep in his bones. He wrapped a thin towel around himself and perched on the edge of the cot, trying to anchor his shaking body. Rough concrete bit into his feet. The faint smell of bleach and sweat churned his stomach. He didn't move. Didn't breathe more than necessary. Just existed. Counting seconds felt pointless. Thinking felt worse. Just survive. Then he noticed it. The door. Slightly cracked. A thin blade of light cut through the dark. A shadow moved. Izuku froze. Every nerve screamed. His stomach twisted. Accidental? Or a test? Then a figure stumbled forward. Vector. His face was drained of color. Eyes blown wide, pupils black with fear. He stumbled into the room, boots scraping harshly against the floor. His hands clawed at the air like he could grab the walls, the light, anything to stop what was happening. Please. I'll do better. I swear. I'll do better." His voice cracked in a way that didn't sound like a fighter. It sounded like a human about to disappear. Izuku's chest tightened. Jiren followed behind him. One hand rested lightly on Vector's shoulder. Not cruel, not sharp, just heavy. Unyielding. Guiding him forward with slow, deliberate pressure. The other hovered near the clipboard, thumb tapping in a rhythm that felt too calm for the moment. "Scores went down last week," Jiren said flatly. "But some thugs are paying more to take you off rotation than keeping you here would make. You'll make me more out there than in the ring. Business. Not personal." Vector's knees nearly buckled. He shook so violently he looked like he might fall apart. "You'll survive if you do your job," Jiren said. Cold. Reading from a ledger. "But don't expect me to care about excuses." Izuku pressed his palms into his knees. Dug his nails into skin to stop the shaking. His stomach twisted. He remembered the fight with Vector. The hits, the pivots, the weight behind every blow. For the crowd. For the bets. For survival. But seeing Vector now, dragged down the hall, panic etched into every breath, something heavy lodged in his chest. Was it his fault? Had his punches, his angles, his choices put Vector here? The thought made nausea rise quick and sharp. He thought about going easier next time. Holding back. Letting the other fighters survive just a little longer. But then his mind snapped to the league. Summer camp. What they wanted. What they could do. And Jiren. The cold edge in his voice. Slip up. Hesitate. Falter once. And Izuku would be sold. I'll burn the back of his throat. His body ached from the ice bath and fear and everything in between. But he forced himself upright, hands shaking, jaw clenched until it throbbed. He would rather suffer every punch, every bruise, every scream in the ring than become leverage for the league. Every movement from now on, every angle, every twitch of his torso, every shift of his stance. It had to be perfect. Immaculate. Survival demanded it. Vector disappeared down the hall, dragged with the quiet, terrifying efficiency only Jiren had. Boots scraped concrete. Chains clinked somewhere farther down. The flickering lights hummed overhead. Izuku pressed his back against the wall, his heart hammering. Stomach roiling. He couldn't let it happen. Not to himself. Not again. Not to anyone who crossed his path. Perfection wasn't a choice anymore. It was survival. Weeks before Shigaraki met Zero. Shigaraki slumped on the couch, stuffing spilling out like an open wound. His fingers twitched at his neck, nails scraping lightly over skin. Rage still buzzed under his ribs from the USJ. All Might should have been dead, he hissed. Dead. And those stupid kids. His nails dug harder, skin reddening. They just got lucky. Every single one of them. A quiet hum drifted from the corner. All for one didn't step into the light. He never needed to. Luck, he echoed. A curious concept. Some children rely on it. Some survive in spite of it. And some, his tone softened, create it. Shigaraki glared at the dark. What's that supposed to mean? A soft rustle. A file slid across the table. Kurojire's list of potential recruits. Shigaraki had skimmed it once, barely glancing at a small, unremarkable name near the top. All for one's gloved hand hovered over it, just short of touching. You dismissed one entry rather quickly, he said, voice light, almost amused. Understandable. The boy isn't flashy. Doesn't draw attention. Shigaraki's fingers twitched faster. 0, he muttered. That quirkless brat? Just Jiren's side project. Entertainment. AFO's tone stayed patient. And yet, he keeps winning. The words were soft, but they lingered, like a needle sliding under skin. Shigaraki shifted, irritated at himself for reacting. People like underdogs. They like watching them get tossed around. FO tapped the file once. Slow. Measured. Tossed around, but not defeated. Curious, isn't it? Silence stretched. Shigaraki's foot tapped a sharp rhythm on the floor. Too loud. Too quick. He's quirkless, Shigaraki snapped. He shouldn't be worth anything. So he is, FO agreed pleasantly. And still, very few adults in Jiren's ring can lay a hand on him. Fewer still can predict him. The pause. AFO tilted his head. A child doing what grown men cannot. Shigaraki froze mid-twitch. He didn't want the thought. Didn't want it planted in his mind. But it burrowed in anyway. If a quirkless kid can do that, what could he do for me? AFO didn't push. Didn't speak. Just waited. Waiting was pressure. Waiting was control. How long's he been fighting? Shigaraki demanded, irritation barely masking curiosity. Since he was young, Fo replied, polite and maddeningly vague. Children shaped by certain environments develop quickly. And he grew up beside someone who pushed him hard. Someone explosive. Shigaraki frowned. Explosive. AFO tilted his head. The Bakuga boy. They were raised together. Shigaraki stilled, eyes dropping to the file again. Izuku Midoriya. AFO didn't smile, but something in the room shifted an approving warmth without comfort. Children left on the margins, he murmured, learn to watch what others ignore. They see the seams in people, the weak points. The ones heroes never bother to look for. A realization settled with a soft, inevitable click. It wasn't just that the kid survived. Wasn't just that he won. It was where he came from. Who he grew up beside. What that implied. And if All Might ever found out the kid was here. The thought bloomed fast and hot. Excitement. By obsession. Shigaraki hated how good it felt. If I had him, he whispered, fingers twitching rapidly, All Might would choke on it. And those bratty students? They'd never see it coming. FO remained silent. But silence was a hand around Shigaraki's throat, guiding him downward. Shigaraki leaned forward, breath picking up. But Jiren, his jaw tightened. He'll want something. He's useful. He brings me people. Connections. FO tilted his head barely there, but confirming. Shigaraki's lip curled. So I have to pay. He said it like the word itself was rotten. AFO didn't answer. He didn't need to. The space between them insisted on a conclusion. Shigaraki clenched his fists. Fine. If that's what it takes. His voice dropped, dark and shaking with anticipation. I'll pay whatever that greedy BSRD wants. AFO finally moved, placing a gentle hand on Shigaraki's shoulder. Steadying, shaping, guiding. Almost fatherly. I knew you'd reach the right conclusion, he said warmly. Shigaraki didn't notice, would never notice, the thought had taken root. And somewhere deep inside the boy, a cold certainty began to grow. He needed that kid. Jiren arrived first. He always did. Better to set the tone than walk into someone else's. Surprises were for people who got paid more than him. He had a cigarette between his fingers and a clipboard tucked under his arm. He heard them before he saw them, details he clocked out of habit, the way any man in his line of work learned to. A heavy thud. A muttered curse. The rough drag of a chair across concrete. Those. Shigaraki. Kurogyari materialized first. Smooth, calm, the eye of someone else's storm. "Good evening, Jiren," he said, polite as if they weren't all standing in a building that smelled like old metal and worse decisions. Then Shigaraki stepped out behind him. Slouched posture. Fidgeting hands. Fingers scratching at his neck with that frantic irritation that always meant he was already angry about something he hadn't said yet. Jiren didn't bother greeting him. He just exhaled smoke and flicked ash to the floor. "You said this was urgent?" he said, voice flat. Shigaraki glared like the word urgent was a personal insult. "You ignored my first message." "I was working," Jiren replied. "Business doesn't wait every time you get twitchy." Shigaraki lunged half a step forward. Shoulders tightening, fingers curling like he wanted to grab something and decay it just to make a point. "Tamura, maintain your composure." "I am composed," Shigaraki muttered, still glaring at Jiren. "I just don't like the way he talks." "Then sit," Jiren said, tapping the table with his pen. "And let's talk numbers like grown men." Shigaraki's eye twitched. But Kurogyari guided him into a chair before he could throw it across the room. Jiren opened his clipboard to the page marked 0 performance metrics. Green highlights down the margins. Consistent wins. High betting returns. Damage manageable. Profit steady. Exactly the kind of sheet that made other men show up at his door. Kurogyari folded his hands neatly. "We'll begin plainly. The league intends to acquire the boy." Jiren snorted quietly. "You and half the underground, apparently." Shigaraki scratched harder at his neck. "He's quirkless," he snapped. "Why the hell do people want him so much?" "Value isn't about quirks," Jiren said. "It's about what people are willing to pay." Kurogyari's eyes met Jiren's briefly. "We can compensate financially or provide resources, equipment, whatever you require." Shigaraki leaned forward, voice low, eyes bright with a dangerous hunger. "I want him. Midoriya. Bakugu's childhood friend." He leaned closer, almost whispering. "Imagine his face when his friend he hasn't seen in years shows up with us. Imagine All Might realizing he lost a kid to villainy." Jiren didn't flinch. Kurogyari didn't react. "And you think he'll cooperate?" Jiren asked, voice measured. "Kid's stubborn. Survival-focused. Not easily pushed." Shigaraki's grin widened, predatory. "I have ways to make him do what I want." Jiren flipped another page, calm. "Then the real question, what's your offer?" Kurogyari's tone was smooth, precise. "Triple his monthly earnings." Shigaraki slouched, fists flexing, simmering with barely contained energy. "Triple's cute," Jiren said, unbothered. "Had another client offer double that already." Shigaraki's hands twitched violently. "What?" "Anonymous," Jiren said lightly. "Doesn't matter. Highest number gets the merchandise." Shigaraki's teeth clenched. "Ridiculous. He's quirkless. Worthless." Jiren met his gaze evenly. "If he were worthless, you wouldn't be here." The silence was heavy, pressing, like a hand against the throat. Kurogyari's hand stayed on Shigaraki's shoulder, steadying him, containing him just barely. "You want him," Jiren continued. "Enough to show up in person. Enough to beg. Enough to pay. That's value." Shigaraki trembled with poorly contained impatience. "Fine," he growled. "Fine. Kurogyari pay whatever he wants. I just want the brat." Kurogyari inclined his head. "We will match the highest offer. Add 20% for exclusivity." Jiren's smile was razor thin. "That," he said, tapping his pen once, "is a real number." Shigaraki leaned forward, manic triumph stretching across his face. "So he's mine." Jiren clicked his pen closed. "If the money comes through," he said, "the boy is yours." Kurogyari bowed once. "Expect a confirmation within the hour." Business concluded. But Shigaraki wasn't finished. He leaned across the table again, grin stretched too wide, eyes too bright. When we get him, Shigaraki whispered, I want to see Bakugu's face shatter. I want All Might to choke. And that kid Zero? I'll make sure he remembers exactly who gave up on him. Jiren didn't react. He didn't need to. He stood, dusted ash from his coat, gathered his clipboard. Just send the money, he said. Whatever you do with him after. Not my concern. Kurojirai bowed politely. Shigaraki waved them off, vibrating with anticipation like a child promised a new toy. Jiren stepped into the cold night, pulling the warehouse door shut behind him. Zero's page was still open on the clipboard. Under his breath, barely audible, Jiren murmured. I hope you survive what they're planning. They paid enough to expect perfection. He walked away. The cot was too thin, laughably so. A strip of fabric stretched over metal, pretending to be a place meant for rest. The blanket didn't fare much better. It barely brushed his shins, a pitiful attempt at warmth. Cold had long since stopped being a sensation and become a condition, something that lived inside him now, dug under his skin, curled around bone. It gnawed where fists had struck, where boots had pressed him into the floor until the world blurred to static. Everything ached. Everything stung. Every inhale scraped like something broken. Izuku curled tighter, knees pulled to his chest as if he could make himself smaller, harder, less noticeable. The cot complained under his weight. Another thing displeased to hold him. The air smelled of old smoke and wet stone. Not a room. Not even close. A cage. A holding space for things that weren't meant to matter. He pressed his forehead against his knees and tried, foolishly, to quiet the tremor crawling up his spine. To breathe past the ache sitting heavy in his ribs. To think of something that didn't hurt. Or at least hurt less. His fingers brushed the basin beside him. A cracked, mismatched thing filled with water gone cloudy and stale. The overhead light flickered, casting the surface in warped reflections. He dipped his hands in anyway, letting the sting of cold water bite into the cuts, the bruises, the places where skin had split under someone else's amusement. For a breath, just one, the walls stopped clamping in. For a breath, the world softened enough that he could almost pretend. He imagined gentle hands smoothing over his knuckles, like his mother used to. Patient. Soft in a way nothing here ever was. A voice calling his name through the clatter of dishes. A smile meant only for him. A kitchen with sunlight instead of concrete with mold. He let it wash over him. Just for a heartbeat. Just long enough to remember he had belonged somewhere once. And his shaking eased. He stripped away the old bandages with practiced movements, each one a small ritual carved into him over months of necessity. Slow, quiet, methodical. The only thing in this place that was entirely his. He tore off the old bandages, movements slow and deliberate, performing the familiar ritual he'd built piece by piece over months. He cleaned each cut, each bruise, each angry line across his skin. He wrapped new strips of cloth around his arms and legs, tightening them with careful precision. Pain sharpened him, but the routine steadied him. Each wrap was a tiny refusal. A whisper he kept tucked somewhere deep. I can survive. I promised her I would. I will. The wind hissed through the cracked window, threading through the cold air like a warning. No footsteps. No angry voices. No keys rattling a command at him. Just him. Just the dark. Just the cold chewing slowly at his edges. He let the kitchen memory settle again just for a breath. The chipped mug. The crooked sunlight. His mother humming off-key, swaying a little as she stirred something he'd forgotten the taste of but remembered the warmth of. Maybe one day. The thought rose on its own, unbidden, traitorous. Maybe one day I can return to that. He shoved it down instantly. Violent. A mental blow meant to bruise enough to make him learn. Hope was a liability. Hope made you reach for things you weren't allowed to have. Hope got you reprimanded, punished, corrected. Hope got you sold. Hope got you killed. He didn't hope anymore. He didn't dream. He didn't do anything but exist in the narrow space allowed to him. He sat with his back pressed to the freezing wall, blanket clutched tight between white-knuckled fingers, and waited. Because survival required obedience. required silence where he wanted to scream, stillness where he wanted to run, compliance in the places where everything inside him splintered. It kept him breathing. It kept the promise alive. Live, Izuku. Live no matter what. So he did. Breath after breath. Hour after hour. Waiting. Because living for her was the last thing he had left. The first alarm buzzed at 4:12 a.m. Aizawa ignored it. He hadn't slept. Not for hours. Not for minutes. 3 case files lay open on his desk, pages marked with bloodless notes. 2 monitors flickered with surveillance feeds, faces blurred and still. A cup of coffee sat abandoned, cold enough to bite. His eyes burned. His shoulders ached. None of it mattered. Every new report. Every testimony. Every grainy photograph. All pointing to the same thing, a missing child. One he should have found already. Footsteps pounded down the hall. Fess, chirp. Erase her head. Tsukachi's voice cut through the stale office air. Taut. Controlled but stretched thin. Aizawa lifted his head. Instantly. The detective came in, tablet clutched tight, fingers white, breaths shallow and quick. Too fast. Too sharp. We have it, Tsukachi said. No preamble. No pause. Ledgers. Transfers. 2 witnesses willing to talk. Warrant approved. 5 minutes ago. Aizawa was already on his feet. Not a flicker of hesitation. His scarf fell around his shoulders like something alive, sensing danger, sensing blood. Team, he asked. For pros, Tsukachi said. 2 tactical squads. Local units en route. Waiting. Aizawa nodded once. Didn't need names. Didn't need faces. He knew skill. He knew experience. He knew fear would not stop them, but he also knew they weren't him. He moved. Down the hall. Out the doors. Into the bite of early morning, cold and sharp. Exhaustion peeled off him like old skin. Location. Warehouse district. Old textile factory. Entrances confirmed. Guard rotations mapped. Interior checked. No time to clean. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. Faint red glow rising behind tired lids. But they don't get time. No one argued. No one needed to. 10 minutes later, they reached the staging zone. Pro heroes stood ready. Tension wrapped around them like wire. Gear strapped tight. Some familiar. Some new. All professional. Tactical units checked weapons, ran comms, loaded restraints. Edge shot patrolled the roofline. MD Lady waited at the perimeter. Snipe scanned the alleys. Rocklock and Death Arms coordinated with local units. The air hummed with quiet fury. Aizawa stepped forward. Listen up, he said. Voice low. Wire sharp. Target, illegal ring. Jiren Takami. Expect resistance. Expect fear. Expect desperation. Silence pressed in. There's a child inside. Cold washed through the teams. Anger sharpened into focus. Aizawa's jaw clenched. We get him out, he said. Whatever it takes. No speeches. No hope. Hope was wasted time. Action didn't wait. He pulled his goggles down. Move. And the raid began. The smell hit Aizawa first. Sweat. Bleach. Old blood soaked into concrete. A thick, humming panic vibrating under everything, like the air itself was flinching. The warehouse wasn't built for sunlight. Just flickering industrial lamps that buzzed overhead like dying insects, coating everything in a sick, yellow haze. His boots splashed through puddles he didn't want to identify. Chaos erupted the moment the raid team breached the loading bay. Move. Move, a tactical officer yelled, her voice ricocheting off metal walls. Fighters scattered like startled animals. Men and women with taped knuckles, split eyebrows, swollen ribs, mostly debtors here to pay off Jiren, desperate villains trapped in the system he ran. Some older than him. Some barely older than his students. One bolted past him. Aizawa's scarf snapped out. And the man collapsed, immobilized before he could struggle. Another tried to escape through a side door. Snipe dropped him with a perfectly measured shot of binding foam. Edge shot slipped past Aizawa in a blur of steel thread agility, pinning two more against a crate before they could react. Manual sent a controlled cloud of smoke to obscure movement, keeping fleeing fighters contained until tactical units could intercept. More yelling. More boots. More bodies hitting concrete. The heroes moved efficiently, separating fighters, securing exits, and making sure nobody got hurt unnecessarily. Aizawa would let the others handle the other fighters. They weren't his main focus. Under all of it, he sensed something was wrong. They didn't give the usual resistance. There was no organized pushback. No guards holding ground. No weapons drawn. Just panic. Directionless, desperate, empty violence. Aizawa moved deeper, steps long and deliberate. His scarf uncoiled and recoiled at his sides like a hunting animal. His gaze swept over the main ring. Bleachers overturned. Crumpled betting slips scattered like filthy confetti. Cash and chips trampled into the floor. A microphone stand knocked sideways. The cage door half open, rusted hinges screaming with every tremor. Empty. Gutted. It looked like the whole place had been abandoned mid-breath. Something's wrong, Aizawa thought, muscles tightening. He ducked under a fallen scaffolding beam. A collapsed medical station came into view. Not sanitized. Not professional. Not safe. Just towels with dried brown stains. Cheap bandages. Metal buckets filled to the brim, sloshing thickly with every vibration of boots pounding the floor. Aizawa's chest constricted. This was far from legal. He wondered how they were able to operate for so long without being shut down. The hallways blurred past betting rooms, cramped lockers, corridors dented by fists or heads or both. Blood smeared along one wall. A cracked tooth on the ground. A shoe abandoned mid-run. The detective part of him catalogued everything with cold precision. But under it all, where is he? Where is the kid? The farther he pushed, the worse it felt. Not cleared out, empty. Not fled when they heard us, empty. Hollow. Like someone had ripped the spine out of the operation long before the heroes arrived. Manuel slowed beside him, eyes sharp. This isn't right. They're not scared of us, they're scared of something else. Hound Dog sniffed the air sharply. His ears flattened. Fresh movement. Dozens of people. All running the same direction. Fast. Aizawa didn't like the sound of that. Tsukachi's voice crackled through comms. Teams 1 and 2 have secured the fighter's corridor. Minimal resistance. Minimal. Aizawa said. This place should be swarming. Exactly, Tsukachi replied. Something's off. Aizawa already knew. He could feel the absence. A cold vacuum, like stepping into a home that should be warm and finding every window open and the beds cold. Someone important had run. Someone who always ran. Jiren, Aizawa muttered. And then he was running. Officers shouted updates as he barreled past. Doors crashed open. Boots thundered across concrete. Heroes moved to clear paths, restraining fighters, securing the area, and tending to anyone injured. He didn't stop for any of it. He didn't have the time. Not anymore. The back corridor reeked of cigarettes and stale air. Tight walls. Low ceiling. The kind of hallway where secrets rot. Aizawa moved fast, Tsukachi on his heels. The corridor behind them shook with noise. Shouts, crashes, the dull thud of bodies hitting concrete. Get him out of the corner. Snipe's voice echoed distantly. Edge shot, left flank is clear. Someone screamed. Someone else begged. Something metal clattered and rolled until it hit a wall. Aizawa didn't slow. He didn't knock when he arrived at Jiren's office. He kicked the door open. The crack of it hit the room like a gunshot. And then stillness. The office wasn't chaotic. It was worse. Not tidy. Not organized. Stripped of identity. Behind him, the chaos raged on. A hero barking orders, a fighter sobbing, the thump of Hound Dog pinning someone who wouldn't stay down. But in here, there was nothing but silence. The chair behind the desk still spun lazily, half circles scraping over the floor. Like someone had shoved away from it moments earlier. Aizawa froze. His eyes swept the room with deadly precision. Files gone. Folders emptied, left like peeled skins. Desk drawers pulled out, contents missing. Computer monitor wiped clean, flickering with blank static. The tower hummed softly, metal cooling down. A burst of noise exploded from the hall, a pro-hero shouting, "Get those civilians to medevac. Now." Aizawa barely heard it. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and pressed his palm to the computer casing. Not hours old. Not half an hour old. Minutes. Maybe less. A half-burned cigarette sat crookedly in the ashtray, thin strands of smoke curling upward. Fresh. Mocking. A crash erupted behind him. A door being forced open, someone yelling, "Down? Get down!" Followed by a grunt and a body hitting the floor hard. Aizawa didn't turn. His jaw locked until something in it ached. Jiren had been here. Typing. Erasing. Packing. Escaping. And Aizawa had missed him by breaths. Tsukachi appeared in the doorway, slightly winded. Noise from the corridor spilling around him like floodwater. The shouts, the arrests, the officers corralling fighters into restraints. Eraserhead, what's the situation? Aizawa didn't turn. He stared at the smoking cigarette like it was laughing. He's gone, Aizawa said, voice low and raw. Another impact shook the wall behind Tsukachi. Hound dog snarled something unintelligible. A fighter cried out. Midnight's voice erupted, sharp and commanding. Put pressure on that wound now. Tsukachi stepped fully inside the room, shutting out none of it. His eyes swept quickly. Did he leave anything? Ledgers? Transaction logs? Names? Aizawa tore through the room again. Everything incriminating was gone. Not sloppily. Not hurried. Professionally. Like Jiren had done this before. Like disappearing was part of the job. He opened the desk cabinet empty. Checked under the desk dust. Kicked the trash bin cigarette butts and one shredded receipt. Nothing. No files. No papers. No trace of the man beyond the fresh curl of smoke rising from the ashtray. Aizawa's scarf twitched behind him, reacting to the frustration vibrating off him. He knew, Aizawa said, voice tightening. He had warning. He cleared everything. Another scream echoed down the hall, followed by Snipe calling. We've got one resisting. A muffled thud. Silence. Aizawa's mind raced. It made sense. Too neat. Too precise. The commission had already paid for the fight. Could he have known? Jiren wasn't reacting, he was anticipating. Planning. Escaping before the sirens even screamed. Tsukachi's voice crackled over comms. Eraserhead. We can't touch him. Aizawa snapped. We have nothing. He's out there, and in the eyes of the law, he hasn't done a DMN thing illegal. Tsukachi didn't argue. He couldn't. They both knew the truth. Jiren had vanished into the cracks like he owned them. And somewhere in this building, there had been a child they came to save. Aizawa forced a breath past the tight coil in his chest. He hadn't lost yet. Not the kid. Never the kid. Zero's still here, he said, already storming past Tsukachi into the noise and confusion outside. I'm not leaving without him. Behind him, the smoke curled upward, a thin, taunting ghost of the man who'd already slipped away. Aizawa ran back into the dark halls, purpose burning hotter than his anger. The raid kicked into a higher gear. Second floor clear, moving to storage. Left wing secured, 6 fighters restrained, need medics now. Eyes up. 2 fleeing on the catwalk. Voices collided over comms until they were indistinguishable, just layers of urgency stacked on top of panic. Boots hammered the concrete. Metal doors slammed open. Somewhere, Midnight shouted. Spore field deployed, do not enter without a mask. Someone else yelled for stretchers. The air vibrated with noise. Heroes, villains, fighters, civilians, the scrape of restraints, the crash of overturned equipment. Aizawa moved through it all like a blade, cutting straight through the center of the storm. Tsukachi covered his flank. Snipe was already clearing the second balcony. Manual guided a pair of stumbling fighters out toward medics, hands steady even when the building shook from the chaos. Every hero was talking at once. Hound dog, sent trail leads east, repeat, east. We found another locked corridor, forced entry beginning. Someone barricaded room 12B, push on my count. Be careful in the infirmary, blood everywhere, slippery. 3 civilians unconscious need support. Aizawa barely heard them. He absorbed everything. He filtered everything. He kept moving. The corridor narrowed. Less screaming here, but breathing. The echoes changed. Softer. Thicker. Like this part of the building held its own secrets. Hound dog pointed. Down there, he growled. One door's wrong. Smells wrong. Aizawa's heart kicked once. He didn't run. He simply accelerated. Down the hallway. Past peeling paint, broken locks, rust climbing the walls like mold. Past the last tactical officer sweeping the adjacent corridor. A single metal door waited at the end. Heavy. Scuffed. The paint around the handle rubbed raw from years of hands pulling at it. Aizawa reached out, and the world behind him roared. He touched the doorknob. The noise did not fade, but it felt like his brain sealed it behind glass. He opened the door, and everything stopped. The room was small. Too small. A cot shoved into the corner like an afterthought. Thin blanket. A cracked basin. A bucket that smelled like fear. Concrete walls sweating moisture. The single exposed light bulb buzzing overhead. And the cold. Aizawa felt it hit him like a physical force. Sharp, invasive, like stepping into the aftermath of someone else's suffering. The world outside the door dissolved. The shouts. The footsteps. The chaos. Gone. It was just him. And the room. And the life that had been contained and crushed inside it. He didn't breathe for a moment. His eyes moved, slow and deliberate, cataloging details with the precision of a man who didn't want to believe what he already knew. Thin bandages piled next to the cot. Some used. Some blood-speckled. Some replaced too imperfectly for any adult to have done it. Aizawa's chest tightened. His students. Their hands. Their faces. Sunlight in a classroom. Laughter spilling through hallways. Young heroes in training with bright futures and bright eyes and bright hopes. And here, a child sat in cold darkness, wrapping their own wounds in silence. His throat burned. He stepped deeper into the room, feeling the temperature drop with every inch. There were scratches on the wall, too small to be made by an adult. Lines. Not words. Lines counting something. Punishments. The cot creaked faintly as he passed it, like it remembered a weight. Aizawa reached out and touched the basin. Cold water. Still. Recently moved. A towel hung over the side, stiff with dried blood. His jaw clenched. The boy he hadn't found in time. The boy who had slept here. Bled here. Waited here. He imagined one of his students in this space. Head bowed, trembling, holding themselves together with tiny, stubborn breaths. The image nearly crushed him. His hand curled into a fist. For a long moment, he simply stood there, breathing the cold, breathing the absence, breathing the proof of a life that had been hurting right under his fingertips. Footsteps behind him. Someone exhaled sharply. Eraserhead. He didn't move. Another step. Hesitant. A tactical officer. Sir, does this? A swallow. Is this the boy's room? Aizawa's eyes finally blinked. The world crashed back in. Boots. Shouting. Comms buzzing. A fighter sobbing somewhere down the hall. Officers dragging someone out in restraints. Edge shot calling over comms for extraction support. Manual asking for another stretcher. Chaos slammed into him all at once. And he realized he'd gone still too long. Focus, Shoyuda. He dragged his mind back with force, like pulling himself out of deep water. He hated himself for drifting. For freezing. For letting the silence swallow him when a child needed him moving. He turned slightly voice hoarse. This is his room. The officer hesitated. The boy isn't here. We swept the hall. Nothing. Aizawa already knew. He felt the absence like a bruise. They moved him, Aizawa said. Before we breached. Hours. Maybe minutes. We don't know where. I know, Aizawa said quietly. Too quietly. He looked around the room once more. Slow. Final. Then he stepped out. The rest of the raid blurred into motion. Shouted reports. Heroes guiding wounded fighters. Civilians evacuated. Evidence techs swarming in. Tsukachi giving orders with a voice cracking under exhaustion. Snipe dragging out 2 unconscious guards. Midnight stabilizing a bleeding teen. The building shook with the weight of the rescue. But Aizawa didn't feel any of it. He moved through the chaos like a ghost, scanning every face, every corner, every shadow. No green eyes. No small frame. No zero. The warehouse emptied floor by floor. The ring fell silent. And the child they came for was still gone. Aizawa stood in the middle of the pit, surrounded by echoes. Boots, radios, metal, breath, and felt the cold from that room clinging to him like frost. He closed his eyes. Just for a second. Just long enough to make a promise. 0. His breath shook. I will find you. His hands curled, aching. But for now. He forced air into his lungs. Opened his eyes. Lifted his head. You will need to keep waiting. And then he moved again. Back into the noise. Back into the aftermath. Back into the hunt. It wasn't done. Not even close. The room was dark. Cold. Silent except for the faint buzz of the dying hallway bulb. Izuku lay curled on the cot, eyes open, muscles locked tight. Every nerve still burned from yesterday's ice bath, every breath scraped the inside of his ribs. Sleep wasn't an option. His body refused it. The door slammed open. A harsh strip of hallway light sliced the room in half. Izuku jerked upright, breath catching sharp and fast. Jiren filled the doorway, framed in smoke. The cigarette between his fingers glowed like a tired star. His expression was unreadable, the practiced neutrality of a man who never bothered wasting emotion. Sorry for waking you, he said, voice low, clipped, almost casual. There's trouble, we need to move. Izuku blinked, throat tightening. What? Now, Jiren said. A flick of ash. Get dressed. Put your shoes on. The pause. Almost a shrug. You're leaving. Izuku felt his stomach drop, but his face didn't change. It couldn't. Questions meant punishment. Hesitation meant worse. He scrambled to his feet. His fingers trembled so badly he nearly dropped the shirt twice. The fabric dragged against bruises still swollen and tender, catching on healing skin. Jiren stepped inside, surveying the tiny cell with the detached efficiency of someone inspecting a storeroom. The basin. The cot. The bucket. The scraps of cloth. Inventory. Nothing more. Just be quiet, he murmured. No questions. Izuku nodded once. Mechanical. Obedience was its own kind of armor. They moved down the corridor. Concrete walls closing in. Bleach. Sweat. The harsh sting of metal and disinfectant ingrained into the air. Izuku stayed a half step behind Jiren, keeping his pace even, his breath soft. The hallway felt more awake than usual, distant voices, a faint clatter, the scrape of shifting equipment. At the base of the stairs, several guards waited. None looked at him. None moved. A soft shimmer pulsed in the corner. A tall, shadowy figure formed from rolling mist, collar and cuffs drifting like slow clouds. Hands folded neatly. Professional. Unemotional. A silent escort, nothing more. Izuku's chest tightened. Jiren gestured toward the warp-like distortion behind the misted figure. Go on. Keep up. Izuku swallowed. His legs felt unsteady as he stepped forward, toward the place where the air bent like heat on asphalt. The distortion thickened, deepened, darkened, and then footsteps. A figure stepped through. Shigaraki. Slouched posture. Hoodie wrinkled. Hair sticking out like he'd rolled out of bed angry at the world. He dragged his nails idly along his jeans, not threatening, just restless, like a kid fidgeting during a boring class. When he saw Izuku, his expression perked, a spark of interest lighting up his face in a way that made the room colder. Oh, Shigaraki said, voice too casual. You're tiny. His head tilted, studying Izuku like he was looking at an action figure someone had stepped on. A curious, crooked grin slid onto his face. Yep. You'll do. Izuku's breath hitched. Shigaraki took a step closer, bouncing slightly on the ball of his feet, impatient energy rolling off him. You listen, right? he asked, tone sing-song, almost childish. "'Cause if you don't listen, everything gets messy and I hate messy." Izuku nodded, fast. Automatic. Shigaraki leaned in, eyes bright with a dangerous kind of excitement. "Good," he whispered. "Good. Don't piss me off," he scratched his neck. "I break things when I'm set off." Behind Izuku, Jiren exhaled smoke like he was already done with this entire scene. "Follow their instructions, Zero. Don't start trouble." The misted figure lifted a hand. The distortion swelled wider, shimmering like oil swirling in water, pulling gently at Izuku's clothes. Shigaraki's grin sharpened, boyish in shape but jagged at the edges. "Come on," he said lightly. "Let's go before his face puts me in a mood to trash the place." Izuku didn't respond. He stepped into the distortion. Jaw clenched, breath thin and shaky, the world twisting into cold and dark and noise. Obedience kept him alive. Questions got him killed. So he didn't ask anything at all. The portal shimmered, swallowing the world behind them. Shigaraki stepped through first, like he owned the space even before it existed. Izuku followed a heartbeat later. He didn't cling, didn't stumble, but his feet made tiny, apologetic taps on the new floor. Shoulders tight, chin down, every movement a quiet attempt to disappear. The bar unfolded around him. Low chatter, clinking glasses, smoke curling through something sweet in the air. Heads turned. Some eyes drifted past him, others stuck, lingering too long. A man sat in the corner, half his face stitched together in mismatched patches of burned and smooth skin. His grin stretched wide over the scars. Well, the man drawled. "Didn't think the boss would actually bring him here." The words landed like a weight on Izuku's chest. His breath hitched. Shigaraki shifted. Not much, just enough that Izuku felt the barrier of him instead of the man's stare. Then a blur of movement. A girl bounced into his line of sight, twin blonde buns bobbing. Her eyes were bright, too bright, delighted and sharp all at once. "You're here," she chirped, and it would have sounded sweet if he didn't sense the hunger hidden beneath it. Izuku stiffened. His fingers twitched. He forced them still. Shigaraki lifted a hand, his palm angled between them. No push, no touch. Just a warning. She froze mid-step. "Don't, Toga," Shigaraki said. Final. Toga pouted but didn't argue. The patchwork man Dabi, Izuku remembered suddenly, from news reports and rumors, let out a low laugh. "Relax, boss. Nobody's gonna break your new toy." Izuku's stomach tightened. Not sharply, but in that slow, familiar way he recognized far too well. Of course that's what they saw. People had always used him for something. A punching bag, a spectacle, a target to toughen someone else up, a joke to make the day go faster. His effort was entertainment. His pain was background noise. He'd learned how to keep going anyway, learned how to stay small so it hurt less. So the word shouldn't have surprised him. It fit in a miserable sort of way. But hearing it out loud still scraped something raw inside him. He didn't want to be that. An object, something passed around, something that didn't get to want anything at all. Not that it mattered. What he wanted never mattered here. Izuku tried to speak, to say something, even if it was only a whisper, but his throat closed. No sound came out. Just a small, tight breath he hoped no one heard. A quiet swell of darkness thickened near the back of the bar, mist drawing itself into the faint outline of a person. Smooth. Controlled. Detached in the way the truly dangerous always were. The voice that slipped out was calm. Almost gentle, the kind of gentleness that didn't mean safety. "Everything is ready, Tamura Shigaraki. His room is prepared." The words hit harder than any shout. His room. Not a room. Not temporary. Not something he was being allowed to use. Izuku felt the words settle like a stone inside him, heavy and wrong. His room. As if anything here could belong to him. As if a door and a bed and whatever waited inside weren't just another cage arranged by someone else's decisions. If they controlled where he slept, when he moved, what he did. If they owned the air he breathed, then it wasn't his room at all. It was simply the space they'd chosen to keep him in. Shigaraki's fingers twitched. A scrape along his jeans. A tilt of the head. The air drew taut. Good, Shigaraki said, low and sharp. The words struck like a whip, snapping Izuku's thoughts to attention. He's done for the night. Izuku jerked upright, a pulse of small, defiant protest clawing at his chest. I am fine, he stammered, voice tiny, brittle. You're tired? Not a question. Not concern. A statement that left no room to linger, no space to argue, no refuge for his wandering mind. Overwhelmed, he thought. That fit better than tired. The bar's noise pressed in, curious and hungry, teeth behind his ribs. Saying it aloud would have been dangerous. Kurojire's mist curled toward the hallway, a silent invitation. Shigaraki didn't take his hand. He simply positioned himself so Izuku moved at his side, subtly guided, claimed without touch. Izuku followed. The bar dissolved behind them, noise fading like someone dragging the volume dial to 0. The hallway felt colder, narrower. Like it was built for funneling, not walking. Izuku breathed out, a tiny, uneven exhale he hadn't meant to let slip. Shigaraki didn't react. Didn't look at him. Didn't have to. His steps slowed. Not enough to look deliberate, just enough that Izuku nearly walked into him. For half a second they moved side by side, Izuku matching pace without thinking, the space between them narrowing until it felt chosen rather than accidental. Shigaraki didn't look at him. Didn't say anything. But the message was clear in the quiet, in the way the hallway suddenly belonged to his stride, not Izuku's. They reached the far door. That's your room, Shigaraki said. No emotion. No explanation. Just placement. The beat. Don't wander. He didn't wait for acknowledgement. Didn't glance back. He simply moved on, as if the rule had always been there and Izuku was only now realizing he'd been expected to follow it all along. Izuku nodded. The motion wasn't a choice, just reflex, something carved into him deeper than thought. Wanting anything else didn't matter. Wanting anything didn't matter. Shigaraki pushed the door open just enough for him to enter. No gesture. No shove. But Izuku could feel the pressure anyway, thin as a hand at his back, steady as a command. He stepped inside. Shigaraki didn't check if he was settled. Didn't offer another word. He simply closed the door with a soft, final click. And the lock slid into place like a sigh. Izuku didn't know how long he sat there after the door shut. Time felt weird in the little room, thick, like the air was syrupy. The lamp in the corner buzzed faintly, flickering every few seconds like it couldn't decide if it wanted to stay alive. Finally, he let his eyes drift around the room, letting the familiarity of observation settle over him. It was small. Very small. But not a cell. Not chains. Not the ring. That was something. A tiny, stupid something. A shelf leaned crooked against the wall, half collapsed on one side. There was dust in the corners thick enough to draw in. The thin blanket on the cot looked like it had been washed too many times, the fabric rough and pilled. A small table sat beside the bed and on it. He blinked. An empty notebook. 2, actually. The kind sold in convenience stores for 100 yen each. His chest tightened unexpectedly. He reached for the top one like it might disappear if he took too long, fingers brushing the cover. The paper was a little warped from humidity, but otherwise untouched. And used. He opened it. Blank page. Blank page. Blank page. Something in him loosened. Just a little. He wasn't supposed to write anything, probably. He wasn't supposed to do anything without permission here. But the notebook wasn't not allowed either. It wasn't locked up. It wasn't taken from him. He flipped to the first page again and stared at it until the panic shaking his hands softened to a dull tremor. A pen rolled out from under the notebook, cheap ballpoint. Maybe someone left the whole set here on accident. Maybe it was deliberate. Maybe this was another test. He had no idea. He picked it up anyway. His handwriting came out shaky at first, uneven from how tight his grip was. But once he started, the familiar rhythm crept back in, tiny lines of cramped text running along the top of the page. Quirk analysis number 1. Kurojire. Warp gate. Mist-like body. Teleportation triggered by calm voice commands. No visible cooldown. Writing helped. It always had. It put his brain in a place where the fear didn't bite quite so hard, where everything could be sorted into neat little boxes with bullet points and diagrams and tiny scribbled theories. It reminded him of being human. The sounds from the bar bled dimly through the walls. Shigaraki's grating, restless complaints rising and falling. Someone arguing loudly with himself. Izuku had no idea why, but it wasn't like he was in a position to judge Toga's sharp, delighted giggles, and that lazy, smoky drawl from the burned man drifting over everything. Izuku's pen stumbled for a moment. But he wasn't alone. There were villains on the other side of the wall. Dangerous ones. Violent ones. Unpredictable ones. He shouldn't be doing this. He should be curled up on the cot, pretending to be quiet and obedient and grateful. But his hand kept moving. Quirk analysis number 2, Tamura Shigaraki. Decay. Touch base. Emotional instability increases unpredictability. He stopped, chewing the inside of his cheek hard enough to taste metal. Writing this felt wrong. Dangerous. But writing nothing felt worse. He kept going. The lamp flickered again, washing the room in a pulse of dim gold. Izuku blinked against it, refocusing on the page, on his breathing, on the tiny world he could control inside the notebook. He didn't know how long he wrote. Only that his hand cramped, and the tight coil in his chest eased enough for him to sit back without shaking. He closed the notebook gently, like it was something fragile. Voices still murmured beyond the walls. Heavy footsteps passed now and then. The base smelled faintly of alcohol and damp wood. Izuku pulled his knees up onto the cot and rested his forehead against them. He wasn't safe. Not even close. But for now, for just this moment, he wasn't being touched or yelled at or forced to perform or sold or restrained. He had a notebook, a pen, a tiny square of space to breathe. It wasn't much, but it was something he could hold on to. For now. Shigaraki never meant to pay attention to the kid. Zero had been here, what? A day and a half? 2? Not long enough to matter. He was supposed to be another body. A tool. Something Jiren dropped off that he'd use until it broke. But the bar had been different since he arrived. Not quieter God, no, but steadier. Less chaotic. The others watched the kid, poked at him, circled him, but he stayed small, controlled, predictable in a way none of them were. He listened. He moved when told. He froze when Shigaraki twitched. Obedience like that was rare. Useful. He didn't think he'd like the kid. But he did. And that became a problem. So when Zero hesitated just to pause, barely a breath, Shigaraki felt something hot crack inside his chest. He grabbed the front of the kid's shirt and shoved him back against the wall. Not hard enough to break anything. Just enough to make the point. You listen the first time, Shigaraki hissed. I don't repeat myself. Zero flinched. Small, instinctive, the kind of movement that meant he was weighing fear against survival. Shigaraki hated that calculation. Hated that someone else had carved it into him long before he ever got here. The kid whispered, sorry, I wasn't. Shigaraki cut him off without thinking. Izuku. Everything stopped. The name slipped out before he even realized he'd said it. Not Zero. Not the number slapped on him like a label for inventory. Izuku. The kid's eyes snapped up really up with something raw flickering behind them. Shock? Confusion? Recognition? Shigaraki felt his fingers tighten in the fabric. That reaction, he liked that. He leaned in, voice low and deliberate. When I talk to you, he said, you answer. Immediately. Do you understand, Izuku? The kid swallowed hard. Nodded fast. Shigaraki let go, brushing imaginary dust from his palms like the whole thing bored him. Don't make me waste my time correcting you again. He turned away, but the moment replayed itself anyway, unwelcome, persistent. He should have gone back to calling him Zero. He didn't. Not when they were at the bar. Because the name did something. Grounded him. Held his attention. Marked him as Shigaraki's in a way the number never did. And Izuku always reacted. Boys. The fluorescent lights of the convenience store hummed overhead, a thin, tiny sound that settled under his skin like a splinter. Bleach. Burnt coffee. Sugary candy. A cocktail of smells he hadn't breathed in years. Too bright. Too loud. Each noise pressed against his ribs until his chest ached from holding itself together. Fire. The thought rose, faint and trembling, then dissolved before it could shape into a question. Grocery run, Shigaraki had said. We're low on supplies. You'll carry the bags. Like that was a reason. Like that made this feel normal. Like staying within arm's reach counted as freedom. Izuku knew better. Wandering wasn't something villains allowed. Not when it came to him. Not when they'd spent months teaching him the exact size of his world. He hadn't stepped into a convenience store since he was small enough to stare wide-eyed at candy racks. The underground had no use for places like this. No use for daylight things. No use for boys who wanted them. This wasn't an errand. It was a measurement. A test he wasn't meant to fail. Quiet. Forgettable. Easy, he told himself. He'd been disappearing his whole life. He trailed a half-step behind Shigaraki, hands clasped, shoulders curled inward. Not in trust. Not in comfort. In necessity. He kept his gaze low. His breaths thin. His footsteps soft. He didn't speak. Didn't let his eyes catch on anything longer than a heartbeat. They lingered in an aisle longer than necessary. Shigaraki stood in front of a display of chapstick, staring at it with an intensity that didn't belong in a convenience store. Not moving. Not blinking. Just staring. Izuku waited, silent and still, the way he'd learned to. Shigaraki's head tilted just a quick, sharp twitch, like a switch flipping. That aisle, he said. Grab the chips. And hurry. A test unspoken, obvious. Just like every other thing they asked of him. Izuku moved. Careful steps. Even breathing. His shoulders stayed angled just enough that Shigaraki remained in the corner of his vision. Close enough to answer to, far enough to pretend this was normal. The aisle ahead buzzed under harsh light. Shelves crowded with color. Too everyday. Too loud. Each package, each sign felt like something from a life he no longer owned. Run. A thought breathed against his skull. Just bolt. They'd never catch you if you. He cut it off. A thought like that could get him killed. Or worse. He reached the shelf. His hand lifted, hovering before brushing the familiar crinkled plastic. He'd seen this brand in the bar, seen villains tearing them open between plans, between orders. The bag crackled under his fingers. A tiny, ordinary success. A step in line. Oi, what the hell? The voice hit him like a slap. Izuku's body locked. Breath gone. Muscles wired with shock. The bag sagged in his hand, slipping as if even gravity hesitated. He didn't need to turn. He knew that voice. Knew it in his bones. The scowl. The impatience sharpened into something dangerous. That explosive bite of disbelief that could strip a room bare. Bakugo Katsuki stood halfway down the aisle, stiff and coiled, eyes wide with a recognition that hurt to look at. He hadn't changed at all, but was somehow a completely different person at the same time. Deku. A few minutes earlier. Bakugo walked into the convenience store, muttering under his breath. The old hag hadn't even mentioned they were out of skis before he started cooking. Who does that? Seriously. You start chopping garlic, reaching for paprika, and suddenly nothing. Empty. Great. Perfect. Just what I needed today. He cursed quietly, loud enough for himself, and stomped over to the spice rack. Cinnamon, cumin, chili flakes, all in place. Still, it didn't help. His hands flexed, fingers curling, clenching the empty air. Lately, life at UA had been tiring, complicated. Every day was some drill, some battle, some idiot thinking he couldn't handle the pressure. And yet here he was, trying to make something as normal as food without losing his cool. He grabbed a bag of tortilla chips from a nearby shelf, muttering about overpriced snacks, when his eyes landed on a familiar head of green curls. Was that? It couldn't be. Bakugo's jaw tightened until it ached. Rage hissed under his skin, but it was laced with something sharper, something he hated to admit. Worry. Panic. Relief. The useless BSTRD. Gone. Vanished years ago. The thought of the chaos he'd caused, the fear, the worry for his aunt, for Mitsuki, flashed in his mind. He'd thought the kid was dead. And now, here he was. Alive. Buying chips. Like nothing had happened. Oi, what the hell? The words ripped out of him before he could stop them, jagged, raw, impossible to swallow back. It really was him. Bakugu's fists tightened, knuckles whitening, teeth grinding. He was said hell. He was fuming, but under the fire, worry gnawed harder. He wanted to charge forward, grab the idiot by the shoulders, shake some sense into him, check if he was breathing, make sure he wasn't gone. And yeah, somewhere in the back of his brain, a little voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, he owed him an apology for all the shitty things he did as kids. But he didn't. Couldn't. Not now. The nerd looked messed up. Too dim and skinny, tense all over, like he hadn't had a real meal or a real night's sleep in forever. But he didn't look weak. The lines of muscle were still there, coiled under worn fabric, posture tight in that way that meant he was always ready to move. Eyes sharp. Frightened, but sharp. Bakugu went still, chest knotted, breath caught somewhere too high. The moment stretched thin, trembling, ready to snap. Deku! It came out rougher than he meant, a scrape of disbelief and anger over something he didn't want to name, hope. The boy's eyes found his, wide and hesitant, like he wanted to speak but couldn't. Bakugu couldn't help but notice the scars littering Izuku's once clear skin. Bakugu caught it a DMN flicker behind Izuku's eyes. Like the nerd actually thought things might be okay. Like seeing Bakugu meant something. Then that BSTRD stepped up behind him. An arm draped over Izuku's shoulders, casual like a choke chain, and the light in Izuku's face went out on the spot. He flinched small, automatic, like he'd practiced making himself smaller. Fear slid into place so fast it made Bakugu's jaw grind. Oh, you found the chips. Took you long enough. Bakugu felt his jaw lock. Everything about that touch screamed possession. Control. Danger. This wasn't normal. This wasn't right. Bakugu scowled, a cold spike shooting down his spine. He knew that voice. That grating, sandpaper voice that set him off on instinct. He almost had it and then it slipped away like dust between his fingers. You're from UA, aren't you? The man said lightly. You're showing at the sports festival, impressive. TC, save the commentary. Bakugu snapped, glaring. Who the hell are you supposed to be? The man didn't even look at him. His attention stayed locked on Izuku as his hand tightened possessively. Bakugu's fists clenched harder. Every twitch of Izuku's fingers, every stiffening of his shoulders, every hesitation screamed, "Get me out." Sorry, but we're in quite the rush, aren't we, Izuku? The man tugged him toward the exit, dismissing Bakugu like he was some annoying background noise. Izuku hesitated. Barely. A tiny shift, a breath caught in his throat, so small anyone else would have missed it. Wait a second, Izuku said, voice thin, strained like it hurt to push the words out. The man's hand clamped down immediately, fingers digging in with casual cruelty. We don't have time to stay and chat. His voice was that same dim and raspy, sandpaper scrape Bakugu remembered like he'd been swallowing gravel all morning. Izuku froze, shoulders stiff, eyes flicking toward him just long enough for Bakugu to see the apology buried beneath raw fear. It hit him like a punch to the gut. Right? Sorry. Dimmin it. Bakugu's instincts detonated like a grenade. Every cell in him screamed. Say something. Yell. Blast him. Grab Deku. Do something. But he didn't. Couldn't. His voice jammed in his throat. His legs wouldn't obey. Shock, fury, disbelief, everything tangled together until he was frozen in place. Watching. Helpless. Izuku was walked out of his reach in slow motion, swallowed by someone else's shadow. And one thought seared itself into Bakugu's skull, burning hotter than his quirk ever had. I'll kill that smug, crusty BSRD. Izuku was Fed. The kind of Fed that seeped under your skin, oily and suffocating, like something rotten was crawling up your spine whispering you're done for, sweetie. Shigaraki didn't drag him. He hauled him like luggage he hated owning. Izuku's shoes squealed across concrete, his hoodie choking him every time Shigaraki yanked like he was trying to snap a stick. Shigaraki didn't make a sound. And that was wrong. Shigaraki was never quiet. He talked, muttered, scratched, twitched, scraped skin with nails that were always just slightly too long. But now, nothing. The silence felt sticky. like something was waiting. Izuku had seen him irritated before, sure. Shigaraki's irritation was practically a roommate at this point. But this felt like being too close to a space heater that might explode. Heat coiling and recoiling under skin stretched too thin. Anger that didn't know where to go, so it just festered and festered until it leaked through the cracks. The door to the bar slammed shut, and the echo crawled down Izuku's spine like cold fingers. The basement beneath the bar swallowed the noise, the air thick with damp concrete and the strong aroma of stale booze. Shigaraki shoved him, not with precision, but with the manic energy of someone who wanted something to break and didn't care what. Izuku skidded, palms scraping raw on the floor. He stayed down, breathing shallow, afraid even his lungs were too loud. Shigaraki paced. No, more like prowled. His steps were uneven, jittery, almost drunk on whatever was chewing through his nerves. His hands raked through his hair, scratching hard enough that flakes drifted down like dead skin snow. His breathing was fast, too fast. Half growl, half whine, like his own body disgusted him. Izuku risked a glance up, tiny and terrified. "Don't look at me." The kick hit the back of his head so fast the world blinked out for a moment. Pain bloomed bright and nauseating, and something warm dripped down the side of his face. Sweat or spit or something he didn't want to identify. "You think you're clever," Shigaraki spat, voice sharp and papery. "You think I didn't notice?" Izuku's voice wobbled. "And notice what?" "Wrong." Shigaraki kicked him again. It was messy, sloppy, like he wasn't aiming so much as trying to feel the impact of bone under his boot. Izuku's breath shot out in a pathetic wheeze as he folded inward. Fingers knotted in his curls, yanking him up so fast his vision pixelated. "That you brat," Shigaraki snarled. "You looked at him like you were gonna crawl to him. Liking at a hero's heels. Gross." Izuku shook his head, frantic. I didn't." "Liar." Shigaraki's breath hit his face, hot and sour, like old sugar and something moldy. Izuku flinched, tears stinging. "You wanted him to save you, didn't you?" No, I swear." "Shut up." He threw Izuku down again. Izuku's shoulder slammed into the floor, something popping in a way that made nausea flood his mouth. He bit it back, swallowing the metallic taste burning his tongue. Instinct screamed. "Run now or don't run ever again. Run so you never become the kind of person who hurts a kid the way you're being hurt right now." Izuku scrambled, slipping on dust, on sweat, on his own shaking limbs. His palms burned, his breath wheezed. He didn't even know which direction he was going. Just away. He made it a few feet. Maybe. Then Shigaraki's hand clamped on his arm. Izuku screamed, high and panicked. "Oh!" Shigaraki crooned, voice cracking like a smile stretched too far. "You running from me now?" Izuku thrashed, heart slamming against his ribs. Shigaraki's fingers twitched. Shifted. Bare skin met all 5 of his dry fingers. Decay raced across Izuku's forearm like acid-hot breath. He didn't just scream. He choked on it. The pain was sharp. It was wrong. Hot and cold at the same time, like the skin was being eaten by air itself. A sensation far more violent than anything he'd ever experienced before. Shigaraki jerked his hand back, annoyed. "You're lucky I didn't take the whole thing." Izuku collapsed, clawing at his arm, staring at skin peeled back to raw, mottled tissue. It looked like a patchwork of exposed flesh, uneven and pitted as if rotted from the inside. An overripe fruit split open and left to fester. Dry flakes clung to the edges, stained a deep, crusted red that bled at the slightest touch. His fingers shook uncontrollably. His breath came in wet, hiccuping gasps. He didn't run again. Shigaraki loomed over him, chest rattling with uneven breaths, lips peeled back in something too eager to be called a smile. His eyes were bright, almost feverish, fixed on Izuku like he was proof of something. Like this mess on the floor justified the anger burning through him. He looked proud. Not relieved. Not satisfied. Proud, as if the fear shaking through Izuku's body was an accomplishment, a problem solved correctly. He straightened slowly, the grin never fully leaving his face. Whatever had been clawing at him before settled, coiling inward, finding purchase. The mess made sense now. The fear did what it was supposed to do. Heh, he breathed a soft, broken laugh. There it is. Izuku glanced up, still gripping his arm as blood seeped past his fingers. His hand wasn't large enough to mask the wound, and the tremor in his grip betrayed his desperation. I'm sorry, I didn't mean, he gasped, cutting himself off as another wave of pain knocked the air from his lungs. Shigaraki clicked his tongue, annoyed. His boot pressed into Izuku's side, a careless little shove. Not enough to hurt, just enough to make him tip, to put him back where he belonged. Now you are, he said flatly. Took you long enough. Izuku curled tighter, fingers burning against the ruined skin of his arm. A strangled sound tore free. His eyes fixed on the wall, distant and aching. Open in the wrong way, like he'd forgotten, for just a second, where he was. Shigaraki crouched with a huff, impatience flickering across his face. He grabbed Izuku's jaw, fingers dry and scraping, forcing his head up. Still thinking about heroes? He asked, voice light in the wrong way. Curious. Almost playful. Still wishing one of them would show up and fix everything for you? Izuku shook his head hard, words cracking as they spilled out. I wasn't, I swear. Good. The words snapped, short and harsh, like a whip cracking against bare skin. Shigaraki leaned in, tightening his grip just enough to make Izuku's jaw ache. His thumb pressed into the side of Izuku's cheek, rough, possessive, as if marking him. 'Cause heroes don't give a damn about you, he hissed, voice low and sharp. They never wanted you. They never will. And thinking about, it's annoying. His eyes flicked over Izuku like he was reading every fragile thought. So don't look at him. Don't talk about him. Don't even think about him. You think dreaming about a hero is gonna fix you? They'll leave you to rot every time. A short, humorless huff left him. You're here, Shigaraki said, low and insistent. This is it. Your job. Your place. His grip tightened for emphasis. You serve me. You stay with the League. That's all you're good for. Izuku didn't want to think about what that meant. Not really. Not ever. All he could feel was the frantic thrum of his own heartbeat, vibrating through his arm, and the warm, sticky smear of blood clinging to his hand. Shigaraki's gaze stayed locked on him, sharp and patient, waiting for any sign of defiance. Slowly, deliberately, Izuku nodded. Careful this time, measured. There was nothing left inside him to fight with. Nothing left to argue. Shigaraki let go and stood, rolling his shoulders like tension was finally draining out of him. The grin stretched wider, uneven, cracked at the edges. Satisfied. Like he'd broken something down exactly the way he wanted. Like he'd won. Shigaraki's hand released the doorknob, and Izuku was guided forward, feet dragging over the cold concrete floor one careful step at a time. The hum of the bar receded behind the thick door, swallowed by the narrow hallway, until the low, murmuring chaos became nothing more than a distant heartbeat. They stopped in front of another door. Smaller. Less imposing. His room, Shigaraki had said once. The lock clicked as it opened, and Izuku stepped inside, wincing as the unfamiliar quiet swallowed him. For walls pressed close, the air heavy with dust and faint dampness. The single lamp in the corner flickered, throwing the shadows of the room into trembling patterns. The door closed. Not slammed this time. Just shut. The sound was small. Controlled. Final. Izuku didn't move. His body kept waiting for the next hit like a reflex that hadn't gotten the memo yet. Muscles coiled. Jaw clenched. Breath caught halfway in and refused to finish the job. Nothing happened. The silence crept in slow, like it had manners. It settled against the walls, pressed into the corners, crawled up under his ribs and sat there heavy and patient. His ears rang with it. He could hear his own heartbeat. It was fast, panicked, stupidly loud, and he was sure it was going to give him away somehow. Don't move. Don't breathe too loud. Oh, time stretched. Melted. Lost its shape. The floor was cold through his hoodie, which was now missing a sleeve, leaching heat from his spine. His arm throbbed where the decay had kissed it, a peculiar kind of pain. itchy and burning at the same time, like his skin couldn't decide whether it was dying or already dead. Hesitantly, he moved toward the bed and lowered himself onto it. His mouth was dry. Sticky. He swallowed and tasted copper and dust. His stomach twisted, not quite hunger, but close enough to recognize the path it was taking. How long had it been since he'd eaten? Breakfast? Yesterday? Time felt slippery, hard to grasp. He stared at the floor. A thin, jagged crack ran through the concrete near his face, like lightning frozen mid-strike. Its branches fanned out unevenly, each line a reminder that even solid things could splinter, could shift under pressure. He counted them. 1, 2, 3, lost track. Started over. Anything to keep his mind from drifting back to the convenience store, to the mistake that would cost him months of painful writing. Bakuga's eyes. The way they'd widened. The way his chest had tightened, traitorous and hopeful. His stomach lurched. Stupid. The thought came unbidden, sharp and mean, and he clung to it because it felt safer than the alternative. Safer than I almost asked for help. Safer than I wanted out. He pressed his forehead against his knees, tracing the crack with his eyes, imagining it spreading across the floor like the mess of his own scattered thoughts. Each jagged line seemed to echo the distance between him and any kind of normal life, between him and anyone who might actually care. Shigaraki hadn't said when he'd be back. That was the point. He sat on the edge of his bed, arm propped on his knee, breath rattling. The cloth he'd grabbed was stiff with dried blood, coppery in the air. He dabbed at the wound, careful. Each touch tugged at ragged skin, leaving a slick, raw patch glistened in the pale room light. Pressing the bandage in, a wet hiss seemed to escape the wound, a sound that felt embarrassingly empty, like the wound itself was sighing in relief and pain at once. The dressing peeled away delicate flecks of flaked skin, catching on the rough edges and leaving a chalky smear of dried blood on the bandage. He wrapped the gauze tighter, tiny tremors shaking his fingers. The sting chased through his forearm again, a cruel reminder of the work still left to do, but the pressure steadied his hand. If I'd just looked away. If I hadn't hesitated. If I'd remembered my place. The thoughts lined up neatly, obedient little things. They made sense. They were easier to swallow than fear. Somewhere beyond the walls, voices drifted. They were muffled, indistinct. Laughter, maybe. Footsteps. Life continuing without him. Izuku stayed very, very still. Because stillness felt like the closest thing to safety he had left. Time passed wrong. Not in clean pieces. No, he didn't deserve that. Not minutes, not hours, just a dragging stretch of after that never tipped into next. He didn't mind, really. He was good at raw-dogging boredom. His arm ached from the occasional notes he'd scrawled in his notebook. His joints were stiff. His stomach cramped, sharp and sudden, like it had woken angry about being ignored. He flinched at the noise it made, hands snapping to his abdomen as if that could muffle it. No one came. The room had changed while he waited. Dust had settled thicker in the corners, and a faint, foreign smell had crept in. Food. Warm, oily, salty. The scent clung to the walls and air, a quiet reminder that long hours had passed. Time measured only by the emptiness in his stomach and the slow, stubborn ache in his limbs. His mouth watered immediately, traitorously, and he hated himself for it. He pressed his tongue to the roof of his mouth, swallowed, tried to pretend his body wasn't already bargaining on his behalf. His throat felt thick, every swallow scraped, dry and loud in his ears. He wondered if the sound carried through the walls. If someone was listening. The thought made his shoulders tense, spine straightening instinctively despite the ache screaming for him to curl back in. Another smell drifted closer, unmistakable now. Rice maybe. Something fried. Someone laughed, muffled but real, and the sound landed in Izuku's chest like a dropped weight. They were eating. His stomach twisted harder this time, a nauseating roll that made his vision blur at the edges. He pressed his forehead to his knees, breathing shallow and careful. Hunger sharpened everything, the throb in his arm, the ache in his jaw, the bruises singing under his skin like they wanted attention. His stomach growled again, louder. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut, cheeks burning with shame even though no one was there to see it. Wanting food felt like another failure. Another thing he hadn't learned how to control yet. His head started to feel light, thoughts drifting slightly out of reach like fish slipping through his fingers. He focused on staying upright, on keeping his breathing even, on not letting his body betray him any more than it already had. Somewhere nearby, dishes clinked. Izuku stayed perfectly still. If hunger was part of the punishment, he would endure it just like Kaken. He never gave in to something as trivial as hunger. Not him. Not ever. For a moment, he felt that old, quiet admiration swell. Kaken wouldn't have wavered. He wouldn't have let himself bend to something so petty, so small. But then, he remembered walking into that chip aisle. The way Kaken had seen him. Helpless, someone who should have been under his protection. And still, he hadn't done anything. Could Kaken really have stayed so unflinching? Would he have? The door opened without warning. No slam. No violence. Just a soft, deliberate click. Izuku flinched anyway. He lifted his head too fast, vision swimming, spots blooming in his eyes. The smell hit him first. It was stronger now. Something fried, crisp and golden. His mouth flooded before he could stop it, saliva thick and humiliating. He hated himself for it. A shadow stretched across the floor. Not Shigaraki's. This one didn't twitch. All that's done, a voice said mildly, amused in a distant way, and he still forgets how fragile people are. Izuku's breath caught. All for one stood in the doorway like he belonged there. Like the room had been built around him. He didn't rush. Didn't loom. Just watched, head tilted slightly. Assessing. Izuku tried to push himself straighter. His arms shook. His stomach clenched hard enough to make his vision dim again. Relax, Ifo said gently. I simply wish to talk to you, boy. That didn't help. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with care. The sound felt final. Sealing. I heard there was an incident, Ifo continued, walking slowly around the room. His footsteps were measured, unhurried. Shigaraki doesn't enjoy disappointment. It agitates him. Izuku swallowed. His throat scraped painfully. I didn't mean to, his voice cracked. He stopped. Tried again, softer. I'm sorry. Ifo hummed, considering. An apology is only useful if it's paired with understanding. He stopped in front of Izuku and crouched. Not abruptly, not threateningly. He stayed just far enough away not to invade, not to touch. Tell me, he said calmly. Why were you punished? Izuku stared at the floor. The answer came easily now. Too easily. I looked where I wasn't supposed to. And? I spoke to a hero student. The pause. And what did that communicate? Izuku's fingers curled into the fabric of his sleeve. His stomach growled again, traitorous and loud in the quiet room. Heat rushed to his face. I wasn't loyal. Ifo smiled. Not wide. Not cruel. Just satisfied. There it is, he said. Understanding. He stood and gestured toward the corner of the room. Izuku followed the motion without thinking. A small tray sat there. Protein. Vegetables. Steam curling gently upward. Izuku's breath stuttered. You're hungry, Ifo observed as if commenting on the weather. Hunger is instructive. It clarifies priorities. Izuku nodded quickly, throat tight. But, Ifo continued, food is not a right here. It's a response. He turned back to Izuku. Stand. Izuku scrambled to his feet too fast, dizziness washing over him. He swayed but stayed upright. His pulse roared in his ears. Good, Ifo said. Now look at me. Izuku hesitated only a fraction of a second. Ifo's gaze sharpened. Izuku snapped his eyes up. There we are, Ifo murmured. See? You learn quickly. He circled Izuku once, slow and thoughtful. Shigaraki is passionate. He feels betrayal like a wound. When you looked at that hero, you hurt him. The word hurt landed strangely. Izuku's chest tightened. I didn't want to, he said quietly. I won't do it again. I know, Ifo replied easily. That's why I'm here. He stopped in front of Izuku again. Shigaraki needs you calm. Predictable. Anchored. If you unsettle him, he lashes out. That harms you. Izuku nodded. This made sense. It fit neatly into the logic already forming in his head. You must obey, even if it hurts. All for one said, voice calm, deliberate, like a blade sliding across glass. Now, dig your finger into your wound. Izuku froze. AFO's eyes didn't leave him. They didn't flinch, didn't waver. They were patient, precise, hungry for obedience. It matters not what you feel, AFO continued, each word measured, pressing into Izuku's chest like weight, as long as you are able to carry out the command. Izuku didn't like this. Not at all. He was used to instruction coaching in the ring, advice shouted over grunts and sparring. That was expected, structured. This felt different. This felt like conditioning. Designed. A version of himself he didn't recognize. One he never wanted to become. And yet he didn't have a choice. The thought clawed at him, sharp and relentless. The part he hated most, the part that made his stomach twist in confusion and shame, was that it was starting to work. His fingers trembled as he peeled back the stiff bandage, the dried blood flaking off like brittle paper. He hesitated, hand hovering over the wound, every instinct screaming at him to stop, to pull away. But the weight of AFO's gaze pressed him down. Slowly, reluctantly, he slid a finger into the raw, slick flesh. Pain exploded through him like fire lancing through his nerves. He hissed, sharp and involuntary, the taste of copper thick in his mouth. Twirl it around, AFO said. Controlled. Expectant. Izuku shut his eyes and obeyed. Every nerve ending screamed. Every groove, every ridge, every uneven patch of raw tissue sent spikes of sensation up his arm, into his shoulder, straight to his chest. His hand shook, slick with blood, but he moved it exactly as instructed, circling, pressing, twisting. Finally, FO's eyes softened ever so slightly, and he nodded. You may stop. Izuku exhaled, a wet, shuddering breath, and carefully drew his finger away. His arm throbbed, the heat of the raw skin radiating into his palm. Good, FO murmured, letting the word linger. See what happens when you obey? When you follow without question? Izuku's chest tightened. He nodded, barely audible, unsure if the affirmation was for himself or for AFO. His fingers flexed against his arm, trembling but obedient, seeking something steady in the chaos. Focus matters, FO continued, softer this time, almost conversational. Not how it feels. Not what you want. Only what you do. The words sank into him, tethering his scattered awareness to a single point: attention, compliance, survival. He swallowed hard, shivering from both pain and the weight of expectation. Then AFO leaned closer, voice calm, unhurried. Tell me, he said softly, whose voice decides what happens to you here? Izuku hesitated, throat tight. Yours. FO inclined his head slightly. Good. And when things go wrong, he continued, who bears the consequences? Izuku's fingers curled against his palm. I do. Yes, FO murmured. Which means you must be careful. Because there is someone who feels the weight of your mistakes more than anyone else. He paused, letting the idea settle. Who is that? Give me your best guess. Shigaraki, Izuku said, barely above a breath, his heart thudding loud in his ears. FO's tone softened, almost sympathetic. Exactly. He is volatile. Sensitive. Easily hurt. The beat. And when he's hurt, he lashes out. You've seen that. Izuku nodded, shallow and automatic. So, FO said gently, what happens when you behave? When you do well? Izuku swallowed. He stays calm. FO smiled faintly. Just, you keep him grounded. Steady. You are very good at that. The praise landed warm and heavy. Then his voice dropped, precise and insistent. Now tell me, who are you here to protect? Izuku froze. The question caught somewhere behind his teeth, thick and metallic with adrenaline. His fingers flexed against his arm, gripping himself without thinking, anchoring. The room felt suspended, every heartbeat too loud. Shigaraki. And who keeps him stable? The silence waited. Patient. Certain. I do. FO's smile returned, smooth and assured, like something clicking neatly into place. Yes, he said warmly. You do. He stepped back and finally gestured toward the tray. Slowly. You've earned it. Izuku didn't move at first. Go on, FO encouraged. Obedience should be rewarded. Otherwise it loses meaning. Izuku crawled to the tray with shaky hands. His fingers trembled as he picked up the food. The first bite was almost painful. Too hot, too good, too much. He chewed carefully, tears stinging his eyes for reasons he didn't fully understand. FO watched the whole time. Remember this feeling, he said softly. This is what happens when you do well. When you don't frighten him. When you stay where you're needed. Izuku nodded, mouth full, heart pounding. Good, FO said, satisfied. We'll make this easier for you. Eventually, you won't even think about heroes. The door opened behind him. Shigaraki's presence flooded the room. It was raw, electric, unstable. AFO straightened. He's learning, he said calmly. Aren't you? Izuku looked at Shigaraki. Then at the food. Then back down at his hands. Yes, he said. And this time, the word didn't feel like a lie. 3 days after the raid, Aizawa finally slept. Not well. He woke before dawn anyway, eyes snapping open to a ceiling he didn't remember falling asleep under. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and old fabric. No alarms. No shouts. Just the low hum of the city outside, indifferent and steady. His body ached in that deep, bruised way that only came after the adrenaline burned out. He stayed flat on his back for a long moment, staring, cataloging the ache like evidence. Left shoulder, strained from too many hours hunched over files. Eyes, dry, burning. He'd forgotten to take the drops again. Hands, stiff. Still faintly smelled like cold metal and concrete, no matter how many times he washed them. The room was too quiet. Aizawa rolled onto his side and pushed himself up, scarf slipping loose around his neck. He didn't bother tying it properly. He hadn't since the raid. It felt wrong, pretending things were normal. The kettle clicked on in the kitchenette. He watched it without really seeing it, mind already replaying the same images it had been stuck on since that night. The room. The cot. The scratches on the wall. He exhaled slowly through his nose and forced the memory back into its box. He'd learned how to do that years ago. Some boxes just leaked. The kettle screamed. He poured water over instant coffee and drank it black, standing, barely tasting it. Then he grabbed the jacket from the chair, still dusted with warehouse grit, and left. The task force office was already awake. Too awake. Whiteboards crowded with photos, timelines, red string and marker scrawls. Screens looping surveillance footage on repeat. Officers hunched over desks, eyes rimmed red, voices low. No one laughed. No one even pretended to. Tsukachi looked up when Aizawa entered. He hadn't shaved. He hadn't slept much either. Morning, Tsukachi said, though it clearly wasn't. Aizawa nodded once and dropped into the chair beside the main board. He didn't need an update. He'd read everything twice already. No sightings, Tsukachi said anyway. No hospital intakes matching the profile. No shelter reports. Jiren's accounts are still clean. Too clean. He's ghosted properly this time. Aizawa stared at Zero's placeholder photo on the board. Not a real image. Just an age range, height estimate, and a police sketch based on fragments from witnesses who'd barely dared look at him. They moved him fast, Aizawa said. He's not local anymore. That's our assumption too. Aizawa's fingers curled against the tabletop. He remembered the water in the basin. So, recently used. He wasn't dumped, Aizawa continued. Jiren doesn't abandon assets that easily. Someone else has him now. Tsukachi hesitated. You think transfer? Yes. The word tasted bitter. It meant logistics. Planning. Networks. It meant Zero was still alive and still trapped. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. Tsukachi studied him for a moment, then said carefully, You should take a break today. Even a few hours. Aizawa's eyes flicked up. Flat, unamused. I am on a break, he said. I'm not in the field. Tsukachi didn't argue. He just sighed and slid a new file across the table. Follow-up interviews from the fighters we detained. Most won't talk. A few are trying. Aizawa took the file. I'll handle them, he said. Tsukachi nodded. He knew better than to ask why. Aizawa spent the next few hours in the station, working through statements, cross-referencing timelines, tracing every lead. The office smelled of stale coffee and printer ink, monitors flickering in the dim pre-dawn light. Outside, the first hints of sunrise began to edge over the horizon, pale and sharp. His mind never stopped, pulling threads together, connecting dots before the world even fully woke. By the time the sky had brightened, he had wrapped up what he could. Scarf coiled around his neck, he left the station silently, heading back to UA to teach his first class. The final bell rang, and the door to the faculty office crashed against the frame, echoing through the quiet halls. Let it shake. Let it crack. Let them all look up and pay attention. Bakugo Katsuki didn't storm in because he was dramatic. He stormed in because standing still felt like choking. A couple of teachers flinched. Someone. A singed in a breath. Papers shifted. Chairs creaked. Aizawa didn't move. Didn't look up. Didn't react. Just sat there with his stupid tired posture and his pen moving across a page like Bakugo hadn't just detonated the room. That set him off more than the stares. Bakugo stood there, fists clenched, heat crawling under his skin, teeth grinding so hard his jaw ached. The words were lined up in his head, crashing into each other, none of them wanting to go first. There was no clean way to say this. I saw a ghost. Silence. Blank looks. Confused ones. Someone blinked like they were waiting for the punchline. Bakugo felt his temper snap tight. Not an actual ghost, you idiots, he snarled. The kid. Someone I thought was dead. Gone. Years ago. And I saw him last night. That finally did it. Aizawa's pen stopped. Red eyes lifted, sharp now, locked straight onto him. Not surprised. Not skeptical. Just alert, like a switch had flipped. Explain, Aizawa said. Bakugo paced once, boots scraping the floor, trying to burn off the image seared into his head. Didn't help. He went missing when we were kids, Bakugo said, fast and rough. Dropped off the face of the map. No body. No answers. Then he just shows up. Middle of the DMN afternoon. Standing in a convenience store like nothing happened. His hands curled tighter. There was a guy with him. Older. Kept a hand on him the whole time right here. Bakugo jerked his own hand toward his shoulder. Like he didn't trust him to stand on his own. The memory made his stomach twist. The way he had gone still. Too still. Like he'd learned not to react. Bakugo's teeth ground together. He flinched the second the guy laid a hand on him, he muttered. Like he was expecting it, but still didn't want it. Aizawa leaned back slightly, gaze narrowing. Did they leave together? Yes. Direction? Bakugo rattled it off instantly. Street names. Turns. Which way the sun hit their backs. He'd burned it into his brain the second they walked out the door. Aizawa nodded once, pen stilling mid-note. And you're certain this is the same kid from your past? Bakugo's jaw tightened. His chest burned. His hands itched to move, to do something. A beat passed. Yeah, he muttered, voice low raw. The BSTRD called him by name. Didn't even hesitate. Something in the room shifted. Not loud. Not obvious. But Bakugo felt it, like a lock snapping shut around his chest, and he hated it. I need a clear description, Aizawa said. Name. Appearance. Everything you remember. Bakugo let out a short, sharp snort through his nose, said that he had to waste time saying this out loud. Izuku Midoriya, he spat. My age but looks younger. Green hair, messy as hell, same as always. Scars everywhere. Clothes were plain, cheap. Barely said a word. Aizawa nodded slowly. Do you have any photos? It could be childhood pictures. Anything. Bakugo's jaw tightened so hard it hurt. His fists itched. No, he growled, jaw tight. We were kids. I don't have any DMN pictures. Never did. Didn't want any. Aizawa tapped his pen once against the desk. I need you to write a statement, Aizawa said. This could be connected to an ongoing case. Bakuga's head snapped up, eyes narrowing, jaw tight. What case? I can't disclose that. Of course you can't. Figures. Bakugo felt his hands curl into fists again. Heat coiled under his skin, quirk itching, begging to snap. He hesitated, jaw tightening. Thinking. Regretting. Hating that part of himself. I didn't follow them, he spat, sharp. Too many civilians. And if I had, that BSTRD would've, he'd have gone after him. I couldn't risk it. Aizawa didn't argue. Silent. Like always. That just made Bakugo want to punch something harder. Write everything down, Aizawa said, voice flat. Time. Location. Behavior. If you see him again, you come to me immediately. Bakugo let out a short, humorless laugh. Yeah. No sheet. Aizawa's eyes flicked up. Warning. Bakugo turned away instead, stalking for the door, chest tight like something was clawing its way out of him. He paused with his hand on the handle. That BSTRD, he snarled without turning. If he thinks he can get away with this, we'll handle it, Aizawa said calmly. Bakugo yanked the door open. Make sure you do, he snapped. Because next time, I won't freeze. The door slammed behind him. And this time, it wasn't for the teachers at all. The school bell hadn't even stopped echoing through the hallways before Aizawa was moving. Books, students, chatter, it was background noise. He ignored it all. By the time he reached his car, he already knew. Every little detail from Bakugo's frantic report, every oddity in the past cases, every flicker of movement in the surveillance feeds. It all pointed to the same conclusion. Izuku Midoriya. The same person. The thought burned through him, sharp and impossible to ignore. He didn't have time to sit, to think, to rationalize. There were too many loose ends, too much danger in play. Sirens screamed faintly in the distance as he drove, tires gripping the asphalt. The streets blurred. Every light, every shadow, every passing pedestrian felt like a clue he couldn't afford to miss. He pulled up outside Tsukachi's apartment. Hand on the door handle before the engine was even off, scarf still coiled around his neck like a living thing, sensing the tension in the air. He pounded the door, voice sharp, controlled. Tsukachi! The door opened at the same instant he said it, the detective's tablet clutched tight, eyes wide with that mix of exhaustion and urgency. They spoke simultaneously. I have a lead. The case is off.